forgot the gavel. Folks, let's get started. Your shoe. Waiting for everyone to take their seats. Good evening. Welcome to the annual town meeting. My name is Jay Tallerman. I am your moderator. I declare, let me just get the volume here. Everyone hears me okay? Okay. I declare that the warrant has been duly posted and published and that the reading of the warrant is waived. I want to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone could please stand. Where's the flag? Everyone ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As is our custom and tradition, we take this time at town meeting to honor those who have passed since our last annual town meeting who have given service to the town. I apologize for any mispronunciations or if we missed anyone. Francis Holman, who worked with the library, Kathy Elder, who worked with the advisory board and other committees, Charles Manos, the KP superintendent, Randy Wilson, a local teacher, Vina Lang, a teacher, George Mandoni, Building Code Committee, Lowell Robinson, a variety of local boards, Michael LaValle, who was a dispatcher, constable, and on the Recreation Commission, and Richard Connors, who we honored at the last special town meeting. If we could have a moment of silence for these individuals and all others who have passed this year. Thank you. I want to introduce some of the players tonight. To my immediate left is Todd Lindmark, who's the town's finance director. To his left is Anthony Turry, who's serving as our town clerk tonight. On the next table, we have the Board of Selectmen with our chairman, Kevin Calcutt, and I'd like to welcome Chris Weeder and Cece Van Tyne to the Board of Selectmen. We can give them a quick round of applause. I'm also pleased to welcome our new town administrator, Blythe Robinson. Can we give her a little round of applause? Also, Dave DeLuca, our town council, is here to help with any legal questions. On the, I didn't say. Down in front of the stage, we have the advisory board who has a big role tonight, chaired by the inimitable Steve McDonough. Steve, raise your hand up there. Tellers for tonight are Paul Terrio and Peter Diamond if we need to count anything. Okay, let's get to some rules for the town meeting. It's governed by town meeting time, rules on parliamentary procedure, and our local bylaws. The warrant contains some general guidance and a glossary of terms, and I'll fill in the blanks on other things. I'll explain procedures as needed. I will recognize requests for points of order if you're confused or if you think we got something wrong up here. I will recognize that's a privileged motion that you can make at any time. All motions will be made by the advisory board. We have an exception if there's petitioned articles, which I don't believe we have today. You may hear a motion for indefinite postponement. A motion for indefinite postponement is essentially a motion to kill that article or to take no action on that article at this town meeting. If you have a question about that, it is debatable. So you can debate whether or not we indefinitely postpone it if you like. Those who make the motions will have the first opportunity to explain, and I will ask the members of the advisory board for a quick explanation for each article that they move. Motions and motions to amend generally must be in writing. I think we have some forms up here. Anthony has forms if you need to put it in writing. I may allow some clerical amendments and friendly amendments, I may call them, to correct minor things without the need for it to be in writing. I will help people if you want to make a motion but don't know the form to put it in. We will help you. because we want people to be encouraged to act when they want to act here. We're going to have hopefully some debate here tonight. I'm going to try and balance discussion as much as possible. Everyone has a chance to speak on a matter, but at a certain point, I may want to avoid repetition. You may hear me ask if there's anything new to see if we can move on with the business of the town. By our bylaws, we have a maximum of 5 minutes the first time to the mic, 3 minutes for the second time to the mic. If you're saying something really important and I think you should be going over, then I'm going to let you go. If you need to go up a third time because it's something new that you need to respond to, I'm going to let that go too. But just know that I have the right to limit that debate. All comments and questions come through this podium, so you have to address me if you have something to say. I don't want any discussion back and forth between the microphones or between the move-in or the selectmen or any other staff member. If you have something to say, address it to me, and if it needs to be commented on, then we'll get that comment for you. I hope we have some spirited debate. I hope there's some disagreements here on some key items here, but it has to be civil. No personal comments at all. I will stop you. I will not allow that. Everyone should be civil and respectful. I want to hear your facts and your opinions. What I don't want to hear is what you think someone else's opinion is. So if you have a fact or an opinion that bears on the question before you, please come to a mic. We've got 2 right up front, and give it. We have a lot of local officials here between myself and town council, and the local officials will try and get any questions answered that need answering. I'm going to try and count every vote on a voice vote. I'm going to ask for yeas and nays after every single question. If I can't do that, I may ask for a show of hands. If I still can't do that, we'll count it. I've got tellers, and we can count it. I do respect a call of the question or a motion to cut off debate. That will potentially stop all debate on it. However, if someone is doing it in a way that, in my opinion, curtails needed debate, or if there's still people lining up at the microphone that I think haven't had a chance to talk, then I may delay consideration of that motion. A motion to cut off debate takes 2/3. I may occasionally abbreviate debate on my own or try and move things along, especially if I'm hearing the same thing over and over again. There are a variety of handouts out on the tables. I hope you all pick them up, including the budget. I'm going to do the budget a little bit differently than we've done it in the past. I'll explain that when we get to that item. Everyone's going to have a full chance. There's also going to be a lot of stuff on the screen for you to refer to help keep you informed. There's a lot of business here tonight, but I think we can get through it all and get you home by maybe the middle of the second period of the Bruins game. And with that, I think our starting motion is Article 2, Unpaid Bills. Mr. McDonough.
Article 2, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate...
You don't have to read the article.
Thank you.
So,
Mr. Moderator, I move to indefinitely postpone Article 2.
second. Mr. McDonough.
Article 2 relates to unpaid bills, and we have none.
This requires a simple majority vote. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Article 3, current fiscal year transfers. Mr. McDonough.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve the transfers as displayed on the screen.
Mr. McDonough.
So this year we don't have too many transfers. The total, as you can see, is $144,000. That will be coming out of our free cash. We have $19,000 going over to planning, and that was for a Main Street stormwater study. $40,000 is going to the DPW, and that was for stormwater permitting. Our next line is $75,000, and that is for police and dispatch salaries. And that number really reflects some additional salary requirements related to the new Joint Communications Center. And our last line item is $10,000 for conservation legal services, and that relates to an investigation related to some wetland issues at 144 Seekonk Street.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Any questions or comments on Article 3? Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes, David Rosenberg, 123 North Street. Can you explain why we have the additional police dispatch salaries? That is, what has happened? I mean, I understand the new regional dispatch center was opened. Why is that costing us more money?
Anybody? Blythe?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, it's my understanding that the Regional Dispatch Center opened a little later than was originally anticipated when the budget was put together a year ago, and they needed some additional salaries to cover that cost until the Regional Dispatch Center opened on May 6th.
Thank you. Any further discussion on Article 3? Seeing none, requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Article 4, compensation schedule. Mr. McDonough.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 4 as printed in the warrant.
Mr. McDonough?
This is a 1.5 increase to all steps on our compensation schedule. It's the same percentage as has been in past years, and pertains to a small number of non-union clerical employees.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on Article 4? Mr. Rosenberg?
Thank you. Can you tell me how the 1.5% increase compares to the inflation rate during that period? Is it more or less or exactly equal to inflation?
I am not sure. I'm not exactly sure what the inflation rate is, so I could not answer that.
Sir, introduce yourself.
Ed Haddad, 138 Red Maple Run. This 1.5% increase, is it already included in the budget that we're going to be asked to approve? So I guess the question is, why are we approving it? And if we're going to approve the budget, why are we approving this as a separate item?
I could probably answer that or have Mr. DeLuca answer it. This is just approving of the schedule, and the appropriation to fund all the salaries is in the omnibus budget.
So if we approve the budget, it's already included. This is not over and above the budget?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Sir, are you coming down to ask a question? No. Seeing none, requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. It passes unanimously. Article 5, the town's omnibus budget. Mr. McDonough.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town fix the salary and compensation of the elected position of town clerk at $78,399.44 as provided for by Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 108, for the fiscal year commencing on July 1st, 2019, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $42,943,757 to defray the departmental and incidental expenses of the town not otherwise provided for fiscal year commencing on July 1st, 2019.
Mr. McDonough, are you yielding to the budget presentations?
I am absolutely yielding to the budget presentations.
Okay, so we're going to have a few budget presentations, and then we will get into the procedure of how we're going to approach the article. Our town administrator is going to start with the town's budget presentation. So we'll have to come back.
Todd, can you go to the next slide and open the first presentation? Well, thank you, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I have really enjoyed my first month in Norfolk. It's a beautiful town with a lot of good things that are happening here. The staff and all the residents I've met have been very welcoming. And I, in particular, want to start out by thanking Todd Lindmark, who has helped me be prepared for this presentation tonight. If he's done his good work, I won't trip up. And also the staff in my office has helped me get settled in, Sue Jacobson, Nancy Langloy, and Scott as well. So with that, I'm going to jump into the budget. This is a lot like the presentation you've probably seen if you were here last year. Given this is my week 5, I think day 22, I'm have just elected to follow that fairly well. But I'd be very interested to hear after tonight if you have any thoughts or things you'd like to know differently or in more depth in the future, because we want to make these helpful for you. So with that, I'm going to jump right into revenues. How do we pay for all the services that we are going to provide in the next year? Those are made up 3 main categories: the tax base, local receipts, and state aid. This year, the tax base is up more than 2.5%. As you probably all know, towns can raise taxes 2.5% through town meeting, and not more than that without additional steps. And this number is bigger than that. Why is that? That's because there's also been new growth in town, either new houses built or additions or renovations, and that growth is about, $750,000 from last year, $625,000 from last year, as well as the growth in the 2.5% increase gives you the number that you see on the screen for FY20. Local receipts are also up a little bit. We have rent that we're receiving from the towns who are participating in the regional dispatch center. We fully funded the revenue we expect to receive from the state, thanks to our state rep and senators on prison mitigation for the prison that is in town, and we expect an increase in ambulance receipts. And then state aid is up slightly over last year. And if we can, I can go to the next slide here. Okay, and so here's a breakdown of the state aid. School aid is up slightly. Charter schools, this is the governor's budget. That's the first budget that comes out in late January. The state legislature through the House and Senate is going through the process. So we've taken a conservative approach by budgeting what the governor recommended, and we'll wait to see how the House and Senate versions are finalized later in the spring. But right now, as you can see, state aid is up slightly over last year. Oops, went a little too fast. Okay, so one other part of the budget that we use to balance is we use free cash. So this is a quick overview of where we started when free cash was certified for the beginning of the fiscal year, $1,033,000. The town spent just under $590,000 at the fall town meeting, and I have those details if anyone needs them, but perhaps you recall all those. We just spent in Article 3 $144,000, and then we're using $163 and some change to balance the budget. I would note that in looking back over the last few years, that number is significantly down than previous years, and I would applaud the town for doing that. It's great that we're slowly reducing our dependence on that and financing the needs of the town through the other means that we have. That will leave us a balance for the rest of the year that will carry into the next year. So it did snow a little bit this winter. Seemed like there was not as much as prior winters, but still, our Public Works Department was out there maintaining our roads, either plowing or sanding, salting. So our original appropriation for this year was $250,000, and I understand that's a typical amount. Our expenses were much higher, $485,000, so we have a deficit that's mitigated a little bit by a revolving fund, and you can see the deficit at the bottom. We're not planning to take care of that in our business tonight. we will defer that to the fall town meeting, and the town will have two choices for that. We can either use free cash at the time to resolve that, or we can add that to the tax rate, and that will be a debate that I'm sure the selectmen and the advisory committee will have at that time. And we'll take it up when we have that special in the fall. Always a question in every community is, well, how much do we have in the piggy bank, in the rainy day fund? And here we have just under $1.7 million, and it is down slightly from last year. We did use $100,000 towards the King Phillip Regional School District budget for FY19, but because we also earn interest on those dollars, you can see that the balance is a little less. It's a good balance. It could be better, but that's always a debate of town meeting. What's the right number to have set aside for things that you don't expect or one-time expenditures? So I'd say we're doing well there. And so we come to the expense side of the budget. What are we planning to spend this year? So in this slide, we're simply trying to highlight for you the, quote, major changes from last year, and the actual list of departments or sections of the budget is much the same as last year's budget. The Norfolk Elementary and King Phillip Regional budgets are 4% and 3.4% respectively, and you'll hear those presentations shortly after mine. The police budget is up really for two reasons. One, we have opened a new, bigger standalone police station, and while we're receiving rent, there are still costs to us to be running that building throughout the year. And we have recently settled a union contract with our police officers for the next 3 years, and there's some costs built in the budget for that. One bit of news I'm very happy to see is that health insurance is down. I mean, when does that ever happen, right? And the good news is our rate overall was a decrease this year of, I think, 3.3%. But there's some puts and takes of people coming on and off the budget, and so it is down just 2. DPW is up for that is the one department that has a new position on the town side this year. County retirement, I won't go into this too deeply, but all employees of the town, not including teachers, who retire with a pension are eligible for a county retirement, and all the systems in the state need to be fully funded, fully vested by 2040, and so I'm not surprised to see this number. All of them are having to raise their assessments of their communities to make sure that they get there, so that's what Norfolk's increases this year. And we'll go into the others a little bit more in a later slide. So where's the money go? Let's get back to that $100 bill. So I think this is a great graphic that was used last year to help show you how it kind of breaks down, put it in a different context. And 65% of the budget goes to schools. If you look at the numbers just for the 2 school districts, you would think it was a little less than that, but you also would need to add in health insurance costs and other insurances and expenses that the town carries. That's why the number is actually higher at 65. The next grouping is public safety. This is your fire and ambulance, animal control, and regional dispatch costs. General government, this is everybody at town hall, as well as the library and the senior center. So administrative and some of the human services and educational services that the library provides. DPW comes next at 6.7, all of the things that they do for the town. And that makes up your budget. So put a few more details on the slide here just to talk about what's really changed. We've narrowed the town council budget. Sorry, Mr. DeLuca. A little bit. We're trying to save a few dollars there this year. In facilities, we've transferred the heating oil costs from the Norfolk Elementary budget to the town budget so we can take advantage of better buying power in one area. I think that was about $89,000 that came over for that budget. I think I mentioned the police department. In the fire and ambulance budget, I want to point out it's not a new position this year. I should have typed it a little bit differently. It was a position added during this fiscal year, and it will be in the budget for a full year in 2020. So there is some impact, but it's not a full amount. And then ambulance billing, like a lot of smaller communities, Norfolk contracts out for its ambulance billing, and we have not been budgeting the full amount of that, so we're trying to do a better job of making sure we've covered any of our recurring costs and they're not a drag on the budget, so we've increased that $5,000. I think I've mentioned police and fire and the regional dispatch. Public Works is the new position. We also had an assistant director that started in this past year, and part of his salary was budgeted to water. In this year, the general fund is absorbing more of that cost because it's more appropriately charged there. And some part-time hours for the COA and a slight adjustment for the recreation director's salary based on some data from other nearby communities. So what happened in the last year and what were things that kind of affected the town and its operations? We've had some change in town. We said goodbye to our longtime town administrator, Jack Hathaway, and we're also saying goodbye to our fire chief, Colin Bushnell, who's retiring at the end of June, and we'll see some change as we come through the next year. We had some good news. We did. I'm very pleased with what the town's done over the years to try to find other ways to finance things through grants and such. And there's two of note this year. DPW won a grant to work on the City Mills Bridge of about $150,000. And I know we will debate this later, but there is the grant for the roof at Olive Day, which perhaps that we will be accepting. 40Bs. I'm sure I don't need to tell most of the folks in the room about those. We have experts here up on the board now. That's been something that we have worked on and will continue to work collectively with our staff, council, and our residents to find the right solutions for Norfolk within the law. And we finished the police station. I don't need to tell everybody that that was a hotly debated project, and there's more discussion that needs to happen as we close it out and we decide what steps we're going to take, and we'll come back to that, I'm sure, at other meetings at other times. And lastly, as we move forward into this next year, once we finish deciding the path to take on the police station, we need to turn to what are we going to do about the fire station. It isn't big enough for the trucks we have and all the equipment and our staff, so we're going to find a new path forward for that. I don't know the timing or the details yet, but I'm looking forward to the discussion about that. In the future, the Freeman Kennedy is soon out of space with all the programs and the kids that it does a great job of serving, and we need to think about that expansion in the future. I'm sure we'll spend more time on 40B projects. I'm glad to see there's been lots of debate and conversation about the town center and what's the right economic development mix and growth for Norfolk, so that will be a topic for us to work on. We've already started working on a capital improvement program for the town. Finance Director Todd Lindmark has been doing that, and I think it'll be very important to help us prepare everyone, taxpayers, boards, and all, for how do we finance the things we need to do in the future at the appropriate time, at the appropriate cost, in a way that's financially acceptable to all of our voters. So I'm looking forward to working on developing that with him, sharing it with all of you, and doing some more financial forecasting that'll help us plan for the future years here in Norfolk. So thank you very much. And with that, Mr. Moderator, I'll turn it over to...
Norfolk Public Schools.
Which microphone?
Fine, thank you. Good evening, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to share some information tonight with you about the 2020 fiscal budget request for the schools. Before I begin, on behalf of the Norfolk School Committee, our administrative team, our teachers, our support staff, and all of our employees, we did want to thank the town for the continued support that you demonstrate every year for both the school budget and also through all the volunteer efforts. We have many, many parents that work in the schools, in classrooms, in the library program. We have senior citizens that volunteer and many other community groups. So thank you for your support. It really does make a difference in the lives of our children. I will jump in. Our budget is always driven by our district mission and our vision statements, which you can see up on the screen. We work really hard to provide a rigorous educational program that's fiscally conservative and responsible, but also that inspires students to become lifelong learners and productive, caring citizens of the ever-changing world. Angled here. Just an overview of our district budget history. So between the years of 2009 and 2013, the town experienced significant recession. During those years, the school budget had annual increases of 0%, 1%. There was actually a year where there was a negative budget negative budget impact on the budget. In order for us to open in the fall the way we close in June, so with the same level of staffing, the same resources, it generally takes the schools about 3.5%. So you can see during the years from 2009 to 2013, we actually had quite a bit of program cuts, staffing reductions, and negative things that happened in the schools. For the last 7 years, the town has been able to support the school budget with an average of 3.88% increases annually. With that, we've been able to begin some restorations. We've brought back some positions, which I will address in one of the future slides. Do you have a clicker? Do you want me to change it? Where? Oh. Okay, thank you. During the last several years, too, we've also had some significant decreases in federal funding that have impacted the school budget. So in grant funding since 2009, we receive about $443,000 less in federal grant and state grant money now than we did back in 2009. At the same time, there's been a significant increase in unfunded state mandates. So we have adoption of new curriculum standards for social studies and for science. We have required professional development that we have to provide annually for all of our staff. We have increased requirements for federal and state data reporting, and we've also transitioned to online testing for MCAS. I think Paul will probably talk about it as well. Over the past several years, we have been able to partially restore some of the positions that were lost. So with the funding from the town, we have been able to partially restore classroom teaching positions that were lost. We have fully restored our instructional support staff. The foreign language program was cut years ago. We have not been able to bring that back at this time. We have been able to partially restore the health education program, partially restore technology staffing. We have fully restored our funding for new curriculum adoption. We have been able to eliminate fees for transportation and for the kindergarten tuition program. We have partially restored the library staffing. We have not been able, as of yet, to eliminate the band fee. This is just a graphic to show you, on average, how the per pupil spending in Norfolk looks compared to the state average. So in 2011, you can see we were spending significantly less per pupil to educate our students than the average of the state. We worked really hard with the town during those between 2011 to 2015 to try to close that budget gap. In 2015, we were right about at the state average. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a significant increase in enrollment, and our per pupil spending consequently has gone back down. So compared to the state, we are right now close to 15,000. The average per pupil is about 16. We do have a set of comparison districts. So when you look at the Department of Education data, they identify a series of districts that they think are comparable to us in terms of demographics, size. Most of these are elementary-only districts, so they're either K-6 or K-8 districts. We use these districts for comparison when we're looking at our achievement data, as well as class size and our per pupil costs. So you can see when you compare us to the other elementary districts in this grouping, back in 2015-16, we were close to the middle in terms of average spending. That has dropped over the last 2 years. In 2018, we were second from the bottom, with Berkeley being the only community spending less per pupil. While our per pupil spending costs have been managed and are low, we do feel that the town of Norfolk gets a significant return on your investment. So our students perform in the top 18% on state MCAS tests. Our class sizes in Norfolk are average, but we do have a lower than average teacher-student ratio. We continue to offer outstanding arts education programs. Our students do have physical education twice a week, health education once a month. Most of our teachers have at least 10 years teaching experience, and we have a very low turnover of our teaching staff, and we have outstanding school facilities. Again, recognizing that the town has limited revenue and limited resources, every year our budget subcommittee really works hard to look for areas for potential savings. We have been able to partner with the town on quite a few different initiatives. We share a facilities director position, and we also share an HVAC support position. So annually we're saving about $60,000 in that. We are also trying to start to share some custodial staff, staggering work hours. We're saving about $15,000 there. As far as the professional development, we've been partnering with King Phillip, who will address that as well, and our other regional districts to share some of those costs. We also have a lot of our own in-house experts providing professional development and training. So we saved $20,000 last year in that area. We continue to work to expand the in-district programs for special education. Next year, based on the expansion we have in this budget, we anticipate saving $255,000 in out-of-district tuition costs. In order to be environmentally friendly, we've been working on reducing our carbon footprint. We saved about $10,000 in paper and copying costs. And then we continue to work to develop some of our own internal capacity to provide services that are required for students at home. So our home-based therapeutic services are provided by our own staff versus contracting out. And that leads to about $15,000 of savings. So our 2020 budget request, as Ms. Robinson mentioned, is a 4% increase. This request will allow us to just maintain level services. We are not adding any new curriculum programs next year. We will need to add 2 classroom teachers to the Freeman Kennedy School in order to maintain the class sizes that we currently have and to meet the demands of the increasing enrollment. We will also be offering 7 sessions of kindergarten. Next year, we have over 135 students already registered. We will be transitioning a teaching position, but we have to add a paraprofessional support position to that 7th session. Our recommended budget, we made quite a few cost reductions in the supply accounts. The services and supplies at the HL Day are down about $2,500, about $1,700 from Freeman Kennedy. Special education instructional supplies are down about $2,300, and we anticipate saving $27,000 in special education transportation. We have reduced our professional development budget by $5,000 and our instructional technology request by $6,500. As Blythe mentioned earlier, we're transitioning $89,000 for heating and fuel costs to the town side of the budget, hoping to increase purchasing power and generate some cost savings there. Our only budget additions this year, we have a $320,000 cost increase that's required by the teacher's contract to move all of our current staff forward and to manage step increases. All of our other staff, we have a 2% COLA recommended. That's at $89,000. We have 2 classroom teachers positions that I mentioned that we're adding to Freeman Kennedy. That cost is $139,000. And the 1 kindergarten assistant costing $22,000. On the expense side, we will have an increase of $37,000 next year for special education tuitions. We are adding $4,700 to our curriculum adoption line because we do have new social studies frameworks that we're implementing, and we need to purchase some new materials to make sure they align with the new standards and state expectations. We have a $12,000 increase in the transportation contract. The overall budget increase breakdown, 3.4% of our total increase is driven by contractual requirements. 1.36% is enrollment driven. 0.06% is special education. And then we have net reductions that we made of 0.85, bringing us to a budget increase total of 4%. Class size projections, all of our projected class sizes with the addition of the 2 teachers are under the policy limit, ranging from about 17.7, 18 students to about 23 per class. Again, our class size comparison, the school committee has really worked hard in their policy and in the budgeting to maintain a commitment to small class sizes. Back in 2015, we were among the lowest class size of our comparison communities. With the increases that we're seeing in enrollment, those class sizes have increased slightly. So from the average class size in 15 was 18 students, we are now at 20, but we're in the upper end of those comparison communities. This is just a portrait of the breakdown of how our budget is allocated. So almost 70% of our total budget goes to funding professional salaries. 4% is for clerical salaries, and another 13% for other salaries, which would be our nursing staff, our custodial staff, our food service program. There is 8% that is dedicated to services, so that's primarily made up of our transportation contract. We only have 3% of our budget that goes to supplies. We have 1% that is for other expenses. That's generally fixed costs, so contractual requirements for sick leave buyback or retirement. And then we have 2% of the total operating budget that goes to fund out-of-district tuitions or special education. Again, we were fiscally conservative in putting forward the request. There's several things that we really feel that the schools need that we have not asked for this year. We would like to see a 0.2% increase in a special education teacher. Again, that's enrollment driven, and that would be at the H. Olive Day School. We would like to, last year we had to cut 0.2 of a team chair position. We'd like to start to restore that again to facilitate our special education team meetings. We are looking for an additional developmental math professional and a developmental math teacher to support students who are struggling to meet the grade level expectations in math. We would like to consider relooking at restoring the world language program. And then our school buildings are used by other town departments throughout a large part of the summer. So rec programs are running all summer. We have special education programs running. It leaves a really short window for the custodial staff to turn over all the maintenance and all the summer cleaning. So we would like to add additional help for custodial services during the summer. Those requests are not included in the current budget. On the expense side, we would like to consider eliminating band fees. We make about $24,000 in band fees currently. And we do have, because of the timing of when the Freeman Kennedy School was built, all of the technology in that building was purchased at the same time. We also have aging technology at the H. Olive Day School, so we need to start thinking about a long-term technology, increasing that line so that we can keep up with the technology replacement demands that we will have over the next 5 years. And that's all I have. I guess I take questions when it's at the appropriate time.
Thank you. King Phillip Schools.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Paul Zinni. I'm your new superintendent for King Phillip, and this is the first time I've had the opportunity to address all of you. I've asked Mr. Larry Azer to join me this evening to help with the presentation because I think he's a familiar face that you all know and have come to trust and rely on as we work on the budget. And so as we move through this presentation, at some points I'll be presenting, at some points Larry will be presenting, and at some points we'll be climbing over each other or speaking over each other to try to do this presentation for you. For those of you in the back, I do apologize. This is as tall as I get, so you're just going to have to move around a little bit so that you can see me, but I think really what's most important is what's up on the screen. So I think this is very important for us to really emphasize to you. Our challenge has been and continues to be to provide you and your children with the best possible education experience for our students while maximizing the district's resources, with the understanding that our member towns struggle with difficult financial conditions. We're very aware of that, and I, like Dr. Alati, want to thank you for the support that you have consistently showed the community. We are incredibly fortunate to have the kind of support that you have continued to provide for us. That said, we do know that for us to continue to grow and to expand, we're going to need to continue that support, and so that's very important for us to share with you this evening. We want to begin by celebrating a little bit of the success that's been going on in King Phillip. And quite honestly, there's a tremendous amount to celebrate. You can see some of the bullets up here on the board. Ranked number 19 in the best bang for your buck for all public high schools in Massachusetts. Newsweek ranked all American public high schools and ranked King Phillip High School as number 381 for the whole country. We have things like DECA with International Championship. We have 5 Boston Globe All-Stars and 63 League All-Stars in 2017 and 18. Our King Phillip Middle School, top-ranked middle school for math in Norfolk County. You can see the list that's up there. And hopefully you all took the handout that was left out in front as well, because there are many, many other successes up there. I won't read them all to you because I know that the Bruins are on this evening and you want me to move through this presentation. But I do want to take a moment to emphasize the scores here. When you look at the scores, one of the measures that we look at as for success academically of our students is the MCAS assessment. Not surprising, it's a score, a test that you've heard about consistently over the years. You can see KP scores in green. And when you look at our scores and you look at the state scores, percentages of students who exceeded the state average, exceeded as proficient or advanced, what you see is in every subject area at every grade level, King Phillip is significantly above the state average. And that's not different for the Norfolk schools, the sending schools. See, Norfolk pours the foundation and then we build the house. And together, we provide you with a home that is beautiful, comfortable, and functional. And so the team is incredibly important, that we're working together, that we're building this house together. But I think the scores say an awful lot. But I don't want to stop with these scores. There's something else I want to share with you. Massachusetts participates in an assessment called the NAEP, the National Assessment of Education Progress. The test is given every 2 years. It's given across the country. And every single time it's given, Massachusetts, at all grade levels, in all subject areas, outperforms the country. Not just one time, not just a lucky fluke, but each time the assessment is given. Additionally, you may hear about those international assessments where our country is falling further and further behind some of the countries across the world. And we hear about how our education system across the country is failing. Massachusetts has disaggregated their scores, looked at them as if we were our own country. How would we perform? And when they do that, in math and science, we fall in the top 5 for the world. So if we take a minute to think about that, and we look here at the scores and we see that in every category, our students are outperforming the state, and the state is outperforming the country, and in fact, outperforming the world. Your children are receiving a world-class education right here in Norfolk, Rentham, Plainville, the King Phillip community. And so we have a great deal to be proud of, and again, we thank you for your support, and as we move forward, I hope that you'll realize why it's important for us to continue with that. There we go. So I mentioned a few of those good news stories. We have them up on the screen. I asked you to make sure that you grab the flyer to look at more of them, but I'd also encourage you, within that flyer are these links. We're on Facebook, we have a Twitter account, and we have a news blog. We're doing our very, very best to push out the stories to you, to tell you about the great things that are going on as they're happening. And so I hope you'll take a minute to pick your preferred method of acquiring information and to start to follow us so you can continue to hear those good news stories throughout the year, not just this one night when I'm up here in front of you. There we go. So we'll turn it over to Larry for just a minute to talk a little bit about the spending.
Thank you, Paul. This is as tall as I get to.
Show off.
Yeah. I got to leave it at that. As we know, the KP schools are in a very unique situation in terms of structure and governance. We have one school district that educates pre-K to 6, and then KP does 7 through 12 and beyond in some cases. And they're essentially 2 completely different school districts. So there are only 11 other districts in the state that have a configuration like that where it's 2 separate entities. However, the other 10 have what's called a superintendent's union, where it's a sort of overarching, where it's one superintendent, one central office over the whole thing. And we don't. So we are literally unique in the state in terms of structure. So it's a little difficult to do spending comparisons, but we're going to try anyway. Our per pupil spending is less than 10 of these 11 districts, and our administration costs are 22% below the group average. So when you consider that all of the other groups are sharing their administration and distributing those costs, and all of KPs are centralized and fully loaded, the fact that we're lower than all but one, I think speaks pretty well. Dr. Lardy talked about the state spending. KP is pretty much similar. We're $800 less than the state average, and more than 9% less than the state average on administration. So again, running a lean operation. And then lastly, there's a data point called net school spending, where the state says you have to spend at least this amount of money on your education. And everybody, if you've been following the news, I think everybody pretty much agrees that that's a woefully inadequate number. And that's why the average district in the state spends almost 24% above that amount. KP is only 12.6% above that amount. So considering all the accolades that Paul just talked about, I think we're running a pretty lean operation, and I hope you'll see that in the numbers. Thank you.
I think it might be easier to actually do it this way. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about the budget highlights. And I'll begin by saying, as Dr. Alati alluded to, we're starting off with a level service budget. So like Dr. Alati said, just to do that would normally take about 3.5% to maintain what was going on. You'll see in future slides that we've worked very hard to not only provide a level service budget, but to do a few enhancements as well, but to also keep that spending down to that same level. And I thought this would work really well, and each time I start talking, the mic starts to slide down. I think it's making fun of me again with that height piece. I don't know. It's taunting me. So let's look at some of the things that we're talking about here. So we are moving to a co-taught model of special education instruction at the middle school level, and that requires 3 teachers. We also have a requirement of 2 English as second language teachers to meet our needs around the second language learners that are now coming to King Phillip High School. And I want to preface that this past school year, we were audited by the state, looking at our services, looking at our special education, looking at our second language learner services. And although we did very well in the special education category, we also recognize that to continue to do that, we need to make sure that the services are designed properly. What you are going to see later, and I will highlight a few times, is that for next year, our special education services, the percentage that we're investing in special education services is down by 11%. We've worked very hard to try to streamline that department to provide the highest quality education possible for our students, but also to do so within our own school environment and to provide the high quality services right there with their neighborhood peers, with their friends and colleagues. And so we are, in fact, you'll see a couple of areas where we are spending in special education, but we really consider it a cost avoidance because we're building the programs internally so that our students can stay with us rather than having to leave and go to other locations at a much higher tuition. So additionally, you see we have 2 teacher assistants that we're adding in there. I want to point out that this budget allows us to reduce our sports fees by 15%. You'll recall a couple of years ago, prior to my arrival here, and just as Mr. Azar arrived, there was a very difficult budget year. And with that, there was a lot of talk about the budget, but also a lot of hardship to the budget for King Phillip. We lost positions, and we had to find revenue sources in other ways. And because of that, the fees went up dramatically. Families who have their students participating in sports are paying over 40% of the cost for those students to participate. And so we want to be conscious of that and bring those fees down for those families that are paying for that, and also to make it more accessible for all students to participate. This needs to be something that every student can access if they're interested in that, and the cost should not prohibit that. So we're looking to bring down those costs back to where they were 2 years ago before that difficult budget. We're also finally separating our principal is also our assistant superintendent. She's doing 2 full-time jobs in one. We know that we need a facilities manager to try to make sure that we're on top of all of the changes that need to take place and all the maintenance that needs to happen in our buildings. We're pleased to announce, I believe we heard Dr. Lottie say, and we also heard Blythe talk about the health insurance. Ours came in at only 3% because, you know, at the regional level, we're responsible for the health insurance of our employees, unlike at the elementary school where that's factored into the town's overall costs. Additionally, as I said to you, our special education out-of-district tuitions and transportation are down by 11%. And in the last year and moving forward, we're looking at purchasing or have purchased 700 new laptops. Our technology is woefully out of date. Our students are still using old desktops that are 5 and 6 years old, wires that are taped. We need to be moving forward and making sure that they have the technology that they need to be successful.
I'm back. And just to add to a couple of those points, even though we are pleased that we're able to reduce the user fees by 15%, it's still what they were 2 and 3 years ago. And even with that reduction, they'll still be about 50% higher than the other schools that we play against. So we do have a long-term goal to keep gradually reducing those more and more. You saw, again, the elementary schools have been successful in doing that. And so we certainly have that as a goal as well. Regarding the assistant superintendent position, when I was up here, my first time I talked about how low our administration spending is. Well, that's why, because we don't have any curriculum directors, and this position will do that. So it'll boost that up, but it's obviously certainly needed. And the facilities manager, that's me. I try to do that as best as I can, but our buildings are getting older, and again, you're going to see with the elementary coming up later as well. We have needs coming up as well, and so we need a full-time professional in that position. So looking at the operating budget, it's an increase of 3.58%, and that includes all of those things that Paul just went through. I think that's a pretty good fiscal plan. Again, as he said, a lot of the positions that are shown as ads are repurposing existing funds because we've shifted programs around. You saw our special education spending is going down a lot out of district, so we're able to fund some of those things within the district. So here's the breakdown by our major spending areas. You're having trouble with the connection? Do you have something you'd like to share with the class? Siri. Blame it on Siri, sure. Where was I? Okay. So here's our major spending areas, and these include all the things, the great things that Paul talked about. You can see our transportation is going down. That's because our out-of-district placements are going down, therefore the transportation is going down as well. We did last year, we're just finishing up the first year of a bus contract. We did, for the contract that we're currently in, we did work collaboratively with the 3 elementary districts. We were trying to do a cooperative bid. We didn't quite get to a fully cooperative bid, but we did work together and aligned, and I think we got a contract that works pretty well for all of us together. And you see there on the bottom of the green, the sped tuition and transportation going down by almost 12%. There we go. Yep.
So again, I want to emphasize that although there was a good-sized list of things that we were adding to that level service budget, we're explaining to you how, again, we're shifting those resources and using those to support the special education program specifically so that we can keep our students in-house. But I wanted to also be very, very clear that we spent a lot of time. Larry poured through the budget over this past year to make sure that we were running a lean and effective budget for you. And that, again, that's why we wanted to emphasize some of those areas where, in fact, our spending went down. But we also want to emphasize how we've also worked to try to find other revenue sources so that we can do the work that you need us to do, but to not put such a strain on the budget. And so, again, we worked with the 3 elementary communities. You saw it in Dr. Lottie's slide, where we were able to work together to write a grant for these 4 for the 4 school districts, the 3 communities, to support mental health services and behavioral health services. Additionally, our technology director, Thank you, Michael Boyce, who worked so diligently to receive an infrastructure grant for technology at $271,000. That's not something that you would see when you walk in. It's for the infrastructure, the Wi-Fi, all the wiring, all the stuff that's under the ceiling panels, behind the scenes, but that's what makes the computers go. And so, again, that kind of work is what we're doing behind the scenes to make sure that we don't put too strong a burden on the community, but that our students get that highest quality education possible.
Dropping this. All right. So as you may or may not know, the way regional school budgets work is that the state gives you a minimum amount that each town has to spend on education, and then anything that exceeds that is distributed amongst your member towns based on the percentage of enrollment that that town has. So this shows the trends of the three towns. Norfolk from last year to this year, it lags behind a year, is down almost half a percentage point. So that is going to, you'll see that in a couple of slides, is going to reduce the assessment or make it smaller than the other communities. We have our capital assessments. Speaking of, hello? Okay. I think.
That's the reason for new infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a hint that we should stop talking. So our capital assessments are actually going down next year because the wonderful turf field that our three communities supported 3-4 years ago, the final payment of that was made this year, so that comes off the books. And now we're getting to our member town assessments. So you see the Norfolk assessments going up 3.4, and your other communities, your partner communities, are going up a lot more. Again, that's partially because the enrollment is down in Norfolk and the state formula. And I'll also point out on the bottom there that our state aid, so again, just like Dr. Alardi said, we rely on the local, the towns. We have some district revenue that we generate, and then we also have state aid. You can see that our state aid is going up less than 1%, a lot less than 1%. There are a number of mandates that the state has committed to on paper, but don't actually back it up with money. And so we're fighting every day and every week to try to get as much as we can on that, and we thank our representatives at the State House for trying to do that. But that shortfall creates more of a burden on the towns. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So we're going to do a budget a little bit differently this year. So around town, and thank you very much to Todd, for the selectmen, to Blythe for getting the budget out at least a week before town meeting, if not more. It's been at various places in town. It's been on the town website. It's on the table. This is the detailed budget. It was available outside for you all to look at. The way we do our budget in town is we have a number of different line items within these categories that are listed. Now, in the past, what we've done when we go over the budget is I read each one of those line items, and people could hold each one of those line items if they wanted. Made for a little bit of a long presentation. It was a little cumbersome. We're going to do it a little bit different this year. They still have the same budget. You can still talk about any individual line item, but I'm only going to ask for holds on these particular ones. So if there's something within those categories in this more detailed budget you want to discuss, hold the general category and you get your same 2 trips to the mic. It's just we're not going to have holds and potential discussion of 100 or so line items. We're going to have it just on these 10 or so categories. So with that, with that in mind and with the detail that you've all been provided, and if you happen to miss one, this is our first year doing this, and you find yourself in the wrong category, it's already passed, that's fine. But we're trying to just limit a little bit the amount of holds that we may have. So, based upon what we have up here, general government, any holds? Okay. Public safety. Education. DPW. Human Services. Culture and Recreation. Benefits Insurance. Debt Service. Without exempt debt. Exempt debt. Okay, so those are the categories. So we're getting back, I think we kind of loosely kept track of what we have here. There were holds on general government. If you had a hold and you want to discuss, debate, or amend anything in that item, whether it be one or more items, come to a mic, whoever held, and let's have some discussion.
John Nuhibian from 3 Knoll Drive.
We need that mic on? Is that mic off?
Seems to be on. I can yell. I'm John Nuhibian from 3 Knoll Drive. I had a question on two things. Can we do 2 items at once, 2 sub-items, or, Mr. Moderator?
That's fine. If you want to mention 2 things, it's your time at the mic. So that's the idea here.
Okay. My first question is on the planning board budget. I noticed that it's doubled, and I wondered if that was related to the increase in 40B activity. The second question, which actually is first in the Omnibus budget, is on the facilities management expense. The elementary maintenance number, which is up by
Wait,
111.
are you still in general government?
Yes.
Okay.
The facilities management, there's an informational breakdown underneath facilities management. It's on the first page. The elementary maintenance number is up by 131%, about $111,000. I was just curious as to what that was related to. Is it related to the roof that's leaking, such that we may not need all of that money for this activity?
Okay, so first, planning board budget. Anyone can speak to that? Here we go. Rich McCarthy, our planner.
Good evening. The line item for the planning board has increased relative to the need for continued licensed site professional services that the town has been providing oversight relative to the Buckley Man, which is the, for those that don't know, that's the 2180 contaminated site on Lawrence Street. The town had last fall made appropriation of $40,000 for a licensed site professional. Coming into this budget season, the way the project was going through the permitting process, we weren't exactly sure what exactly services we might need, so we did an best estimate to have some money in the budget to cover those expenses that are upcoming. They did just release new data that happened on Friday this past week, and we'll be taking a look at that. So as we move a little bit forward, we'll have a better idea. But that's where ordinarily this budget, our expense budget is $10,000. We don't have it specifically committed to one particular item. Last year we spent $7,500 of the $10,000 towards this, and this year going forward, knowing that's already out there, we've kind of planned ahead for that in this budget.
Thank you. Your other hold was facilities management, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Lindmark will answer your question there.
As we discussed earlier in the Norfolk school presentation, we're taking on the oil from the school, so we're allocating about $110,000 for the upcoming year, and that accounts for a majority of it, and there's a small incremental increase which relates to some other items for the maintenance of the schools. So it has nothing to do with the roof.
Thank you. And if I may add, the moderator already said it. Mr. Moderator, I compliment the advisory board and the selectmen and the town administrator for having the omnibus budget available early so that we could look through it on time, and also the clear and concise warrant and recommendations, which is very helpful. Thank you.
And Todd, too, obviously.
And Todd, too, of course. Thank you.
Any other holds on general government that we had? So general government here. So come on up to the mic. Just speak right into the mic. I think they're a little sensitive.
Donna DeCenzo, Stop River. Just a quick question on the informational portion on page 1 of the budget.
Yep.
Are those expenses as well that you're listing there at the bottom of the page?
So, Todd, you want to address how to read that line item?
Can I ask you to rephrase?
The informational section on the bottom of page 1
Sure.
lists what I believe to be expenses, town hall, DPW, senior center. Are those all expenses?
Yes, they're all expenses.
Okay.
So the informational portion
Yes.
is line items that go for the various departments. And then you'll notice in the facilities management, for the expense line for them is $797. So that's just broken out to show you how that expense is
Okay.
done.
So now my question is, under solar power generation, could you explain what that expense is, please?
I'm going to let our facilities director, Matthew Hafner, explain that.
Come on up, Matt.
Matt Hafner, Facilities Director of Town Schools. We have a PPA power purchase agreement with Constellation Energy, who has all those solar panels down at the closed landfill. We have to purchase the power at a low rate. That's what the cost, that's what we're producing. It's paying for the kilowatt hours. And that's also some of the overages for the buildings that are consuming more than we're producing. They're all somewhat into that budget, so we continually increase our power consumption, so it has gone up, but it's contractual obligation, and we're paying a lower rate because we're getting it from the solar panels than we would if we were just purchasing off of Eversource directly, significantly.
Okay, so that's our utility costs there for power.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that line? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
On general government still.
Yes, Ed, Red Maple Run. Just the first comment, is the fiscal year 19 budget meant to be actual
Fiscal
spending?
year 20?
No,
budget?
fiscal year 19. Is it meant to be a reflection of actual spending?
No, that was the approved
I
budget.
understand what the word budget means, but when we're comparing next year's spending, it's more valuable to look at what your actual spending is. That's called zero-based budgeting. That's what I think is more valuable to look at than last year's budget, which may or may not be real world.
Pretty close, less the adjustments in the fall, but the number here in this budget was what this town meeting approved last year.
No, I understand the budget. I'm talking about actual spending.
Right.
So, for example, if a department underspent by 100,000, we're not seeing that in their next year's projection. That's what my point
true,
is.
Right, it's not.
That's
it's
what my
not in
point
that
is. Right.
detail.
So it would be helpful if we could see that numbers in next year's meeting.
Duly noted.
Okay. My question is about legal. It's a strange question because the legal budget actually went down. And in light of the letter that was posted on the website by Ms. Robinson about the police station fiasco, I would have expected there to be more legal expenses in the budget in anticipation of some of the clawbacks that she speaks about in this letter. And I was surprised to see the legal budget decreasing, which might mean to me that there's no action being taken to get some of the remedies that she speaks about in this letter.
If you have something to add, I didn't see a question there, but if you want to speak to that.
The budget for town council services is really set by the time I arrived in town. It's hard to say at this point exactly what amount of legal services we'll need. I can't say that we won't need additional specifically on this, but it's a little too soon to say.
So how do we anticipate a budget?
Question.
Sorry.
I don't want the back and forth.
Sorry. So I guess when we're approving a budget, how do we approve a legal budget that's going down when we think it really is going to be going up? It's something more. Wouldn't you anticipate something?
Well, I don't think she said that it's necessarily going up. It could be aspirational, but
Through you, Mr. Moderator, this was the town staff's best estimate based on what they knew at the time when the budget was put together. Should we have situations arise throughout the year for which we determine additional services will needed, we would come back to town meeting and ask for approval for those.
and let me add anecdotally, because this is what I do for a living too. I'm not a full-time moderator. The single biggest driver of legal costs for a town is litigation. If you don't have a lot of forecasted litigation, then sometimes you try and budget thinking that we'll have a good year and not much litigation. And very often when you see budget adjustments for the current fiscal year, there'll be a little chunk if some unforeseen litigation comes up. That's not uncommon for legal services budgeting.
I used to set legal budgets, I know. That's what I'm saying, though, in light of this letter, I was surprised to not see that. That's my point.
Duly noted.
If this letter hadn't been sent out, I wouldn't have even raised the question.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on general government? Seeing none, we will move on. I believe we had holds on public safety.
Hi, Thomas Klein here from 253 Main Street. What is the replacement for the, does it work? For the ladder truck, because that is like 23 years old. It's refurbished in 2013. It's getting really old. The engine too is getting old. And what's the cost of the ambulance? And for the 2 squad trucks, those are old 9607, and the police vehicles. Because we only have 1 Crown Victoria left, it's getting old. It's going to be gone. It's to 2 Tauruses and N2 and 9 Explorers, and N4 needs a door replacement. Any questions for that?
Thomas, let's see if we can get your questions answered. First on, I think there was a ladder truck question. It looked like, were most of your questions on the public safety vehicles this year?
Yes.
Okay, so who might speak to some of our public safety vehicle needs? Chief Stone.
Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Chief.
What we got this year was 1 police car. We just got it about a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
It's up and running. It's our N6. So, and it's roughly $60,000 a car now. So, with everything that we put in them for equipment. Was that your question for me?
Yeah, that's the question. That's the only Crown Victoria we have. Other one is the N3 and N5 and 7. Those 4 Tauruses. Those 2014, 2013, or the 2 more is the N2, N9. Those again really old. Those are like 13. N4 has a door replacement needs to get fixed.
Well, we're going to try to replace them as soon as possible, but you know we have to wait for funding, so that's not going to happen without that.
So Thomas, one thing I might point out is that we generally talk about capital. There'll be capital requests for some things, and as you'll see soon, we're probably waiting till the fall for a fair amount of that. So I hope you come back when we do this in the fall, because I hope that there's a little bit more on that.
I don't come in the fall. I lived in this town almost 24 years.
Did you have a question on the ambulance and the ladder truck too, Thomas?
Yeah, is the ladder truck going to be replaced? That's been like that since almost 23 years. Because the old one we had back then was like really old, and then the ambulance. We had a 2011 Rescue 2, but now somehow we got an 18 ambulance. And now the Rescue 1's a 16. Any cost for that? Because we had an old ambulance as a Rescue 6 Special Operations.
Anyone that can speak to the status of those 2 primary, Cole, are you making your way down, or? Yeah.
First of all, Thomas, your questions, I think you certainly have a career ahead of you in municipal
municipal government. And
I am, because I'm a historical expert.
Thomas asked a question regarding...
Congratulations for your time, and I wish you the best luck. Go Yankees.
Thank you. I like that very much. Thomas asked a question regarding the fire department ladder truck. Indeed, it is 22 years old. I think we're
23 years old.
23. Thank you.
His memory isn't so good anymore.
That's what happens when you get old.
Yeah, I tell you.
Longer has he been in longer has
I
he
get a turn here somewhere.
well longer has he been in town than me. I've been here the longest.
First of all, the ladder truck, without the assistance of the Department of Public Works Maintenance Division, Paul Vito, that ladder truck would have been out of service many, many years ago. We had it tested just this week. One of the parts of the test involves a magnaflux to test the density of the aerial apparatus itself, and it's basically 1/100th out of manufacturer specification. So it shows that the value of the maintenance that goes into that particular vehicle. Along those lines, we've replaced the rear end of the truck. We've had the engine overhauled to an extent. The aerial ladder has been rebuilt. And we've also done some work with the painting schedule on itself as well. As probably some of you have noticed, it now matches the fleet with the black over red color scheme. Thomas mentioned about the ambulances. We first started going back to the days of Butch Vito. Let's go back down memory lane here tonight. When Butch Vito was here as the director of DPW, we had one ambulance, and that ambulance had reached the end of its life cycle. Matter of fact, the floorboards of the truck itself were the type of the Flintstones, that you could actually put your feet down and stop the truck if you needed to. Not quite effective for the people who operate that truck on a daily basis. But when that truck was put out and we had a new vehicle come in, Butch made the suggestion that we should put a few dollars into it and maybe use it as a second ambulance. And certainly Butch was certainly someone who looked down the road to what the needs of the town would be. Today we have 2 ambulances, and those ambulances run a great deal during the course of the year. We're bringing in now somewhere in the area of just about $500,000 in ambulance receipts. Probably two-thirds of that receipt is due to the first ambulance, another third based upon the second truck that's out there. The truck's life cycle, when we first started, was a 5-year rotation. One ambulance would last in the front line for 5 years, it would be replaced, and it would be placed on the second line. We've now moved that schedule up to a 4-year because of the volume of incidents that we respond to. So that gives you an idea of where we are in terms of the ambulance replacement. Also, Thomas asked about our squad units. We have a small unit that you see probably darting around the community. Some people refer to it as a brush truck. We refer to it as the shift officer's vehicle. And when our staffing goes below 4 on a shift, the shift officer will be assigned to that. That vehicle has a Jaws of Life, a mini Jaws of Life set of tools. It has a first-in bag for medical response. Also carries water and hose, so it could be involved in fire suppression. That truck replaced originally, I think it was a 1970 vehicle that was surplused out, now serving time at the DPW. You might see it running around in the maintenance division as they go and pick up parts to repair other vehicles. We're now in the process of farming out the 1995 squad, which is a Ford. That will be going out to surplus the next couple of weeks. And our new shift officer's vehicle will be coming in next Wednesday, we hope. And one of the things that we did to that is we enclosed the pump capacity and also the water tank and the hose line. So because we live in New England, we built the first one. We just didn't really think about what happens in the weather when we hit January, February, and now March. So this new vehicle will be totally heated. We won't have to take the pump off it during the winter months, and it will certainly avail us that when the shift officer, unfortunately, sometimes is working by themselves and we have to rely on mutual aid, at least that vehicle will have an operational pump in the winter months to respond and take care of any particular fire situation. Did I get them all, Thomas?
Yes. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Any other holds on public safety? Sir?
I had a question in particular on the fire and police communication item. I note that the regional assessment, well, if you take the net number, It's gone up by almost $50,000, $49,000. But we're getting $86,000 back from the regional dispatch center. I guess my question is, did that number go up based on historically the number of calls per town, or how is that number determined, the regional assessment for the different towns?
I don't know who would be an appropriate person to address that line of the fire, police. Mr. Lindmark.
I'll try my best. So the regional assessment is based on a guesstimate for the first year. It is based on number of calls in the area towns. So Franklin has a much higher call volume. They have a much higher assessment. But they're trying to take the budget with the known factors that they have and put the assessment in place. This is the first year that they're doing this, so we think that they might be a little bit high. Hopefully we anticipate a little bit of savings long-term, but we got to get through this first year.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else on public safety? Sir.
Mr. Moderator, I'm Paul Denver from Winterberry Way.
Welcome.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions about the police items, but before that, I wanted to know whether we're going to have an opportunity to discuss the police dispatch center, the construction and the problems that were created at some point in this town meeting.
There's going to be no report, is my understanding, under the committee report section of this. So there's, in terms of the status of that, I don't have a status report for you, or no one is giving one this town meeting. If you have a question that's budget related to that, where it may fit, whether it be on the debt side or on something that may slot in here, you're certainly welcome to ask it.
Well, it seems to me that there are going to be serious questions about our debt issues arising from the fact that there was a substantial overrun. I think we need a full airing of what happened in the construction of the police building, and why things happened the way they did, and what the town intends to do about it to prevent recurrences.
Okay. I appreciate the question, and it's certainly a fair and useful question. I think you heard our town administrator suggest that this is something that this town meeting is going to have to tackle. If not in the fall, then very soon. I anticipate too that the selectmen it'll be maybe a frequent flyer on their agenda items as well, and I encourage you to stay in touch. But we're discussing the budget here, and I'm not being, I completely respect the question, and I think it's well-founded. I'm just trying to keep it to the four corners of what we have in front of us on this item.
Well, I would just request that when the selectmen or whoever else decides to bring this issue forward for public discussion, that's well publicized, because I think many people have concerns about what happened and the future impact on the fire department building and all of our other construction in this town. I think it's a major issue, and I would prefer to have seen it discussed at this town meeting, but I take that for your judgment, and I understand.
And again, we appreciate the question, and we got a full house of selectmen here, and I'm sure they're hearing you loud and clear as well.
Okay. I did have a couple of questions about the police line. I see that we had a 6.9% increase for that line, and it's almost all for salary. I'd like an explanation of that if we could, but I'd like a little bit more detail on the number of police personnel that we have. And I'm a relative newcomer to this town. I'd like to know what we do in order to ensure that the number of police personnel in town is correct, is appropriate. How do we determine how many police officers and patrolmen we have in town? How do we control the numbers and make sure that we don't have too many or too few, since it's a substantial cost to the town?
Chief Stone, right behind you, is going to tackle this.
One of the questions was how many. We have 21 full-time police officers. We're listed for 12. We're short of that by quite a few right now because we've had some retirements. And one of the ways in which we replace people who leave due to retirement or just move on is to pull someone up from our reserve officer rank. They've worked here in town for quite a while, and as a part-time officer, have all the training, and then we send them to the full-time academy from there. So that's how many we have. The question you asked about what should we have? Well, a federal guideline always existed that said we should have 2 officers for every 1,000. We have 21, so our population is roughly 12,000. So if you're talking about how many, it's maybe 24, so maybe we're 3 light, but you also live in the 7th safest community in Massachusetts. So.
Anything else on public safety? Seeing no other comments, we are moving along to DPW. Thomas.
Hi, Thomas Clay here again, 253 Main Street. What roads are they going to replace this year for Chapter 90 funds? According to the State House and Governor Baker's meeting, Bob McGee were meeting last Friday about what roads we were discussing about what roads they're going to do this year, which ones they're going to repave and fix the roads, not patch or chip or seal, which ones they're going to do this year, the horrible ones. Fast winter.
Mr. McGee.
Hi, Bob McGee, Director of Public Works.
Hi,
Thomas, how you
Bob.
doing?
Good, how are
Good to
you,
see
Bob?
you again. For all that you don't know, this is totally rehearsed because Tom and I did get together last week, and as the chief was pointing out, Tom's a step ahead of all of us. He knows these streets as well as I do and better. But to answer your question, Tom, this year we're strapped to just Chapter 90 funds. Last year we had $400,000 just under from Chapter 90. This year, roughly the same amount.
Right.
We really don't have any article money to expend. So with those funds, the question is, and I always say with my hands, we have this much damage with our streets. We have this much money. The key and the trick is, where do we go with that money? What we found to be the best situation for this town is we get into a mill and overlay situation. So the milling process is where a machine will go around and just scarify the top 1.5 inches off, and we'll come back and we'll overlay that with a fresh coat of 1.5 inches of asphalt. Bang for the buck is the best way to say that's how far we're going to get, the best way we can get the distance for that kind of money. This year there's so many bad streets. I mean, you don't have to go, everybody knows all the bad streets and the potholes. It's the worst time of the year for us. But what we're going to try to do is we can't not pay attention to our main streets, the most heavily traveled streets. So the first thing we want to do is pick up where we left off a couple of years ago, and we want to pave a little short section of North Street to get us up to the first roundabout where the new credit union is. We waited out the credit union to repair that because it was in really bad shape, but there's no sense in bringing electrical services to it and digging through new pavement. So this is our year and our opportunity to do that little section. It's only about 200 feet. We're going to go around the roundabout at Liberty Lane and also down to Castle Road. And that's probably the first street repair we'll do coming into this year. The next thing we have targeted is Main Street. Can't ignore Main Street. It's the most heavily traveled along with Route 115, and we're going to pick up Main Street from City Mills. We're going to bring it all the way down to Myrtle Street. It's falling apart, and I don't think it'll last another year.
It's like 15 or 16 years old. It's right by the intersection by the Holmes Bus Complex. I know Dr. Lottie knows that.
Right. We've been chipping away. It seems like every year we chip away at Main Street. We do a little section here, a little section there, and that's the only way we can really manage our pavement. Probably just as heavily traveled as Route 115.
Right.
And although we had a $7 million grant award that took us from the Foxborough Town Line up to past Needham Street, we did a little work a couple of years ago to extend that up to, like I had just previously mentioned, up to just short of the roundabout. The worst part of Route 115 is pretty much from Boardman Street all the way to the Millis line.
Yeah,
and if we were to repair that the way we would like to, we wouldn't have enough money totally in our Chapter 90 funds. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to section off parts of that street.
Right.
We'll mill off sections curb to curb, maybe 50 feet, maybe 10 feet, maybe squared up patches, and we'll repair Route 115 with hopes that in the nearby future, we'll have either article monies or some other force, a grant or something
Right.
to properly overlay Route 115.
Thank you.
A couple other small streets as well, Tom.
Yeah, Medway Branch is the next one, that's the worst. And Cleveland, that's been awful. I can tell, almost 16 years, my dad goes down that road every day to work to be here. One of us on his way to work, and it's awful, especially by Lakeland Farms, especially for that bus, for that horrible road.
Yep.
There's potholes, no sidewalks, as Jack mentioned.
That's right. So your father uses that, we're not doing that one. I'm only kidding. Anyways, Cleveland Street, just like Route 115, there's a lot of construction going off Cleveland Street. We don't want to put in the investment of a brand-new street right at this time, and we don't have the funds to do it. So just like Route 115, we're going to cut up and checkerboard patch that street together. That's all we can do.
Yeah, and Boardman Street like near the Freeman is really falling apart in the sidewalks. And last one is traffic lights. Because you can see, like all larger towns like Franklin, Norwood, or Milton, or other towns have more traffic lights than we do, and than any other small town. Is there any possibility, but just put in a traffic light, but no roundabout? I say no roundabout, just a traffic light by the intersection of Park and Main by the Preston Ledge Memorial Bridge and Route 115 and Route 1A. That's, I mean, not that one. That we know that's a traffic light, but the other one is Boardman and Route 115 Boardman Street. That's the worst horrible intersection.
Right, I think what you were talking about, and I have talked to the school superintendent, Ingrid, about the possibility of a traffic light at Route 115 and Boardman Street.
Yeah.
It's not debatable, we need one there. Unfortunately, like everything else, it's driven by cost. Traffic light alone, for your information, could be from $300,000 to $500,000. So what we did up there was we partnered up with a resident who owns that corner lot. We cleared back some trees, got a better line of sight, and we have on order and should install pretty soon a speed reflection indicator that you'll see as you come down. If you're going 40 and it says your posted speed is 30, it will flash on. You've seen them everywhere, but right now that's the best we can do without funding.
Thank you very much.
You got it, Tom.
Thank you, Thomas.
Brian Mushnick, Frederickson Road, come on back. Come on back. My question is, I've lived in this town, I think, 9 years now. Every single year we fix cobblestone crosswalks. Are we paying for that? Is that warranty? We have this much road to repair and this much money. If you waste any on cobblestone crosswalks, you're cheating us.
So I just want to, within the confines of discussing it from a budget, I don't want this to be a rant. We could be here for a while, and poor Bob has already acknowledged that the roads are in...
This is money, and I'd like an answer.
Well, within the confines of discussing it from a budget perspective.
Did we pay for it this year, again, 2 weeks ago?
We pay for everything. Is it a question or
How much is it? Well, I don't see it in a line item, and we repair it every year. Why hasn't the DPW moved to just concrete it and stamp it versus repairing cobblestones every single year?
Well, that method is inferior. If you go through any town where you see that kind of stamping, you'll see that every 5 years they're replacing it. What we had done was we accepted a grant some 15 or 20 years ago, a PWED grant, that rebuilt our whole downtown. What they had specified was brick crosswalks. The construction of that was made out of 8 inches of reinforced concrete with flush granite curbing in between. So that's existing. That was quite an investment back then. That was free to the town because it was a grant. So the cobbles, the bricks faded away. It was probably not a good design at all. In New England, bricks and salt and sand just don't get along. Cobbles have sustained life in Europe and England and Boston for hundreds of years. So what we did was, very smartly, is we purchased cobbles. We didn't have to purchase the foundation because they were already there. Anytime that you have a downtown and you have crosswalks with aesthetics like we have in every single town, Westwood, Sharon, you need to put an investment into it every single year. It's not just going to survive by itself, even though the cobbles are tough and hardy. You're going to have to come back every year you might have to come back and do a little pointing, but every 3 years you might, if that cobble gets loosened in its cradle, it might have to be extracted and put back in. And what we have in the budget and what we have agreed to with the selectmen was we installed $15,000 into our budget every single year for downtown maintenance. Because if you'll see, we have wrought iron fence, we have a nice granite cap stone wall that it circles the town, we have cobbles, and you just can't walk away from them. And $15,000 a year is a bargain, if you ask me. So I think we're doing a good job with that, and it's aggravating at times, so I can see you're concerned. And I'm actually glad you asked the question because I've been dying to get that out there. I think what we're doing is something that makes this town what it is, and it will sustain time.
Thank you.
You bet.
One more. Bob?
Bob?
Bob, one more. This is an easy one. Is there any money in the budget to put Jersey barriers down by the bridge near the paint factory?
You know, I could have got it. No, there isn't. Let me tell you, we're doing something better. We're going to put guardrails as they should be down there.
Good.
We have, thanks to our state representative, Sean Dooley, and the town administrator, it's $200,000 that we have. We had $150,000 grant. He found us another $50,000. So what we're doing is we're studying that bridge, and we're going to take care of the things that just won't wait. There's a lot of spalling under the bridge. The bridge is actually a monolithic structure. It's a dam and a bridge altogether. But I was a little hesitant about putting guardrails in there because it lags into the bridge, and if hitting it would take the bridge with it. So it's a real tough situation. I think it was built when there were horses and buggies back then, and it didn't make a difference. But we're going to have it fastened in reinforced concrete, so we're going to have a guardrail system down along there this year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Susan?
Sorry, I just have one quick question. I wasn't actually going to say anything. Oh, sorry, Susan Klein, Keeney Pond Road. I just assumed from talking town that the reason you weren't putting a stoplight at Boardman and 115 was aesthetically. The town didn't want it, and it's a small town, and we don't want lights. But you're saying it's because of cost. If cost is the reason, isn't a stop sign really cheap? Can you just make it a four-way stop?
I think I could answer for the chief of police. No, you just can't. You can't put a stop sign. I think the law is that you can't calm traffic with a stop sign. The stop sign is coming out of Boardman both ways, and so the best you can do is like a blinking yellow light or a blinking. You couldn't even do a blinking red light. I wouldn't know how to answer that, but you can't just stop traffic there unless it's warranted, and that would be a police issue. As far as the aesthetics go, I don't know where that came from.
No, I just meant that people who live in a small town don't generally like red lights, traffic lights.
Right.
So, just to clarify,
Sure.
I'm sorry, you're saying that you can't put in a four-way stop because it's a main road and it would be stopping traffic, but you could, if you had the money, put in a stoplight?
Yeah, again, it's a traffic DOT issue. I couldn't intelligently answer that question. I mean, if the chief knows and he's willing to step up, but I think it unlikely, and just because I don't know if you're familiar with Route 115 at Everett. I mean, that's a death trap there. You're coming down, especially if there's any ice and you're coming out of Everett. You got tractor trailers going down there. I mean, they need to be queued up. If anything, a stop sign there would be great, but you can't. And for other places, you'd like to have four-way stop signs, but I just don't know how you'd get away with it there. I would look into it, though. If you're interested, I could get back to you on it.
Okay.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else at the mic, I believe the last hold was Human Services. Mr. Miller, I believe.
Hi, Kevin Miller for Oakview Trail. Could somebody please explain to me the $40,000 cut in the Board of Health?
Anybody? Mr. McCarthy?
Sure. The $40,000 was an article appropriation last November for LSP, Licensed Site Professional Services, and their work was being run through the Board of Health Department, so that's where the money it sat, so it was a one-time. The balance of that budget is the year-to-year budget for the Board of Health, so that's why it dropped.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenberg, under Human Services?
No, this is, I guess, a point of information or something. Mr. Moderator, at the beginning of this article, there were 3 presentations, one by the town administrator, one by the Norfolk School District, and one by the King Phillip School District. I'm concerned that there isn't an opportunity to ask questions about any of those presentations.
Well, as I mentioned to you, if you have a question or a hold that relates to the budgetary items, that's fine. If you have a question about educational policy or their directions, I think what they provided to us was extremely helpful so that we get a yearly check-in with them. But if you have a question on any of their policy initiatives, that would be something that you should direct towards them. The school committees both have meetings, and you should get on that agenda or ask the superintendents directly, but I want to confine this to the budget discussion.
Right. So I guess I'd like to ask a budget-related question about the King Phillip presentation.
So you are retroactively requesting a hold on a budgetary item for King Phillip, so go
Yes.
ahead.
Thank you. The presentation talked about a grant for mental health services, as I recall, and I would like to understand how that money will be used, what that project is.
So Paul mentioned earlier, the 4 regional school districts worked together to write a grant for the state. It is a grant that is intended to provide additional mental health services to students and families and behavioral health services. Included in the grant is funding for professional development for all of our staff and administrative teams. There's also funding for 2 full-time social workers that will be working outside on an individual contract and can provide counseling services, family stabilization services, in-home supports linking people to other state agencies. Those 2 social workers will work between the 4 districts. There's also funding for a full-time wellness coordinator who's going to work on bringing in grant funding to support wellness initiatives, as well as providing outreach to community service providers, bringing counselors into the school to provide support for families, consulting with the health department programs and curriculum. Anything you want to add?
I would add just more globally that this is my first year here with the King Phillip and the Tri-Town, and that I've been exceptionally pleased and privileged to work with the 3 elementary superintendents. We get together monthly to talk about a variety of issues that relate to all 4 of our districts, and Dr. Alati is the one who suggested to all of us that we move forward writing for this grant, and I think it's an excellent way for us to, again, streamline and also coordinate those services between those communities. We know that the mental health issues that we're seeing in students today are growing exponentially, and they're becoming more and more concerning to all of us. And so by working together as a team, I think that this is an excellent opportunity for us to really put the students' needs right there in the forefront, and we're very, very pleased that the state was able to fund our proposal with this.
Thank you. Seeing no one else at the mic, thank you for bearing with all the presentations. It is the one time a year when we can all be in the same room and discuss and debate this. I know it goes a little long on the budgetary item, but I think we're all thankful to have a little bit more information. This budget requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor of the budget as presented say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Article 6, Water Enterprise. Mr. Hupp. And welcome to the advisory board, Michael.
Mr. Moderator, I move to adopt the fiscal year 2020 Water Division budget in the amount of $1,744,019 as shown on the screen.
Thank you. Any explanation on this?
This is a transfer for the enterprise funds maintenance, operation, and incidental expenses. And it's coming from the revenues.
Thank you. Any questions on the water enterprise? Seeing none, this requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. It passes unanimously. Article 7, sewer enterprise. Mr. Hurwitz.
Mr. Moderator, I move to adopt the fiscal year 2020 Public Works Sewer Division budget in the amount of $150,000 as shown on the screen.
Mr. Hurwitz.
All right. The wastewater division budget is voted separately from our main operating budget, as the sewer division is its own enterprise fund, and its sources of revenue are the fees collected from the users of the town center sewer system.
Thank you. Any discussion regarding this enterprise funds? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 8, capital items. Mr. Beachkovsky.
Mr. Moderator, I move to indefinitely postpone Article 8.
Mr. Beachkovsky.
Article 8 is about the capital expenses, which are normally handled at fall town meeting mid-year in the fiscal year.
And I believe we heard that we're going to be tackling some of this a little later. Okay. Seeing no further discussion or anyone lining up at the mic on Article 8, all those in favor of indefinitely postponing this item say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. It passes unanimously. Article 9, borrowing for the HOD roof. Mr. Lutz.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town of Norfolk appropriates the amount of $3,500,000 for the purpose of paying costs of roof replacement, construction, renovation, demolition, testing, professional services, including design and engineering costs at the H. Olive Day Elementary School, located at 232 Main Street, Norfolk, Mass., including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, the project, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program. The town of Norfolk may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, said amount to be expended under the direction of the Norfolk Board of Selectmen and the Norfolk School Committee. That to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to transfer the amount of $696,605 from the Freeman School Construction Fund, or to borrow $2,503,395 under Mass General Law, Chapter 44 and Chapter 70B, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. Said amount includes the $250,000 transferred from Freeman School Construction Fund account 3133 at the special town meeting of November 27th, 2018 in Article 4B, and also the $50,000 received from the Norfolk Advisory Board Reserve Fund transfer on July 26, 2018 for this aforementioned project. The town of Norfolk acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and any project costs the town of Norfolk incurs in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town of Norfolk. Provided further that any grant that Norfolk may receive from the MSBA for the project shall not exceed the lesser of 1, 51 63% of eligible approved project cost as determined by the MSBA, or 2, the total maximum grant amount determined by the MSBA, that the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town and the MSBA,
and that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to take any other action necessary to carry out this vote. Any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payments of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
Get a short round of applause for that long-winded motion. I believe there may be, is there a very brief presentation on this, Dr. Lardy? Thank you.
All right, so we were provided the opportunity to give a little bit of background on the construction project and what the scope will be. I have with me Matt Hafner, who is the Director of Facilities for the town and for the schools. We also have with us tonight Todd Hassett, our business consultant, Brian Neely from Gale Associates, who's done the engineering and design work, as well as Chris Carroll, who is the project manager assigned to the project. So I need the clicker. Okay, thank you. This is an anticipated building repair. The roof on the main section of the HL of Day, which you can see is the picture on the left, is 25 years old. When it was original to the building, and it was shingled originally with a 20-year life expectancy roofing tile. So it's exceeded its useful life expectancy. We also have an addition, which you can see on the left. The addition is 20 years old, also shingled with a 20-year roofing tile, and has also exceeded its life expectancy. We actually have more problems with leaking and water damage in the addition than we do in the main building. So the current roof conditions, we do have significant leaking throughout the building, both in the main section and in the addition. We have had to relocate classrooms of students when we have significant problems. We had to move them, replace and repair damaged furniture and instructional materials. We've had to replace and clean carpets, and we've had to bring in large fans to dry areas to prevent and mitigate any potential chance for mold. We did have a study done to look at heat efficiency in the building. We have a large amount of heat loss through the upper end of the roof line, through the windows in a couple of areas. HL of Day, again, the boiler system in that building is original to the building. Those boilers are 25 years old, so this excessive heat loss that we're experiencing is putting a strain on the HVAC system overall. I have a visual tour so you can have a sense of what some of the pictures are. Todd, you need to start that for me?
I'm just going to give you some highlights of some of the issues going on. You can see there's all sorts of moisture in the eaves there. It's not having proper ventilation. As well as the back side, you can see there's a difference of the inadequate ventilation, which is causing mildew to grow heavily, which deteriorates the roof, and it's already passed. It's starting to curl. The spaces in between the shingles are large. There's one of our light monitors, cupolas. Everybody calls them a different term. They're failing. The panes of glass have failed. Just more inadequate ventilation. You can see the different patchwork that we've put in there to try to just maintain. The roof is very brittle right now. You walk on it, shingles are actually breaking under your feet. On the addition, we put a second layer on the front of it to try to prevent some of the leaking coming in. It's still coming in, but it's hard to tell where the leaks are coming because it's a pitched roof and the whole ceiling in the classrooms all follow it. So it goes to the lowest spots, so it's all hanging out the soffit area. These are all new within the past few years, ceiling tiles, so this is all new damage. We change them often. Wanted to show you some of the recent ones.
That was a contest to see how fast you could talk to each slide. So again, most of these interior pictures show you water damage that we have in the ceiling tiles. Again, as Matt said, we replaced those over the summer, so this is new water damage that we've had throughout the entirety of the building. Oh, I can't get, okay. In terms of the project timeline, so as was mentioned earlier, the district has worked really hard to try to seek and procure outside funding in order to mitigate and offset some of the costs of the roof replacement. We have been working with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. The MSBA offers funding for what they call an accelerated repair project. Districts are eligible if you have a roof that is over 20 years of age, you can apply to the accelerated repair. It's a competitive grant. Last year there were over 60 applicants for the program. Typically they fund between 30 and 35 projects. Before they make their decisions on funding, MSBA sends out a team of engineers to evaluate every single site to look at the scope of the project, the extent of the damage, and then they award grants based on their prioritization of urgency and need. Of those 60 applicants, we were selected to participate in the grant funding. Just in terms of timeline so that the public is aware, we actually started this this process 2 years ago. We applied for MSBA grant funding back in February 2017, but because so many schools across the Commonwealth are aging, they had 73 applicants that year. They raised their threshold and only considered applications from districts who were for roof projects where the roof was over 30 years of age. So they told us in June 2017 we were not selected. We were fortunate that Representative Dooley was able to secure a $100,000 earmark grant from the state to purchase windows and glass work. MSBA in their project scope excludes costs for any glass repair. So we were awarded that grant. We've already purchased all those materials and they're in storage. We were invited to we chose to reapply to MSBA in February 2018. And in June, MSBA voted to approve moving the H. Olive Day roof project forward for just the design schematic portion. That work was done. The design plans were sent back to MSBA, and at their board meeting in February 2019, they approved the project moving forward. During the month of March, Gale Associates worked on all of the bid specs and finalizing the design plans. It was sent out for public bid in April, and the bid opening was in May 3rd. I think the clicker battery, okay. Do you want to talk to the scope?
Sure. So part of the job is we have to remove all the existing shingles and underlayment, and there's asbestos containing materials in there, so that's part of the overall cost. There's going to be some damage the decking. When you walk up there, you can feel that there's going to be issues that have to be repaired. It's all part of the scope. There's also some structural issues in the addition. We have to reinforce and repair some of the damage in the addition side to make it up to a proper code and to accommodate the next step, which is making the building more energy efficient by adding an additional decking that has insulation and an air gap so that new shingles will properly ventilate and it'll last, everything will last longer, and it'll also increase the longevity of the building and the roof. It's an MSBA requirement that we have to make the building have a better, smaller green footprint. We want to do this job one time and not talk about it. We're putting on a lifetime shingle. We want to do high performance wraps, so we're not revisiting all this again. You can see that's not the best picture, but the stuff that was put on there is all failing, and it wasn't what we're looking to do at this point. So we're going to put window siding in the high performance areas, the valleys, the through wall penetrations. We're going to use copper. We're also going to use copper on the 4 roofs of the turrets and the light well up the monitor right there. As far as that it's very difficult to maintain those areas up there with the OSHA requirements. You can't just climb a ladder on top of the roof. You have to have safety protocols. We want to put something that's high performing, so we elected to go with copper. We're going to have to do new gutters. The ones that are there are undersized and falling off and inadequate. We also have to put on new snow guards. We have to do new rain deflectors over the doorways so people don't get soaked when they're coming in. And part of the overall scope of the project is the MSBA requires, at their expense, having the building's HVAC recommissioned to make sure that it's properly functioning and that the building's running efficiently. So it's a big project, but
I think we need batteries here. The overall project budget, the total project cost or the project estimate is $3,500,000. The roof bid for the majority of the construction work came in at $3,043,000. The engineering design services and the overall project management, and MSBA assigns a company to do the engineering design services and an owner's project manager, and we're using PMA Associates. That cost is $300,000. That is the funding that I think Blythe mentioned was already appropriated at the fall town meeting last year for the design schematics. About $200,000 of that has already been spent to date. Then we put in $157,000 for contingency. If we run into any unexpected construction costs or issues, there is a contingency built in. As far as sources of revenue, the MSBA grant funding is $1,066,359. The budget transfer from and the $50,000 and the $250 are the design service money that was already allocated at the fall town meeting last year. There is $696,605 remaining from the FK closeout. So I did just want to point out the Freeman Kennedy construction project was another partnership with the Mass School Building Authority. So we worked with MSBA on the Freeman project. MSBA has a lot of experience in this area. They are very tightly manage the state budget, and they very tightly manage the projects. So even though the scope of the Freeman was much larger, that project stayed on timeline. We opened on schedule, and it came in $1 million under budget. That's the money that's been returned for this, or for a like project. The balance is $1,437,036, which the town would be seeking to borrow. Again, I just want to point out, the town has to borrow the full amount, so it's the $1.4 million plus the MSBA anticipated contribution. MSBA is a reimbursement program, so the town has to pay the upfront costs, we submit the receipts, and the funding is returned up to the cap of the grant. There are some risks if we were to delay the project. So the town's already appropriated $300,000 for the schematic design, and as I mentioned, about $200 of that has already been expended and spent to date. If we delay the project significantly, some of this work is going to have to be redone. We also received that $100,000 grant for the windows and glass work, the materials and storage, and we'll sit there because we don't have the labor cost that's included in the scope of the project. We will have to continue to manage the significant leaking. The HL of day school is at capacity. So when we have a classroom that has leaking and we have to move students, you could have a classroom of preschool students or first grade students in the cafeteria for the entire day. It's really hard to not disrupt the educational program under those circumstances. We will also continue to incur the increased costs for oil and heating due to the heat loss. We are estimating an anticipated 10% reduction in fuel costs with the new installation. That's about $5,000 annually. The current estimate for construction escalation, if you delay the project by a year, is about 6% increase. That would not include the design services or the contingency, but you would anticipate about $192,000 annually in construction escalation. And we continue to have safety and health concerns. When we have leaking and the floors are wet, we worry about slip fall hazards. We worry about continued potential for water damage, but also if the leaking continues, we worry about the potential for future problems with mold and having to mitigate and manage that. Again, at the appropriate time, we're happy to answer questions, as are the project designers and the PMA firm.
Thank you. Before we get to debate, the Bruins are up 1-0, and Chris Sale has 17 strikeouts through 7. So. Okay, so discussion on this article. Come on down.
It sure seems like we need a new roof, Mr. Moderator, for this building, but I just had a little confusion.
If you could speak right into that mic, please.
I'm trying. There we go. A little confusion in my mind on the source of funds. We're talking about transferring some of the money from the Freeman School Construction Fund, but then we're talking about either $2.5 million debt, or potentially if we don't get the grant, then it could be, the debt could be the whole amount. Is that true?
So,
If
Dr.
we
Larned?
could, if we could clarify that, that would be great. Thank you.
So we've already been awarded the MSBA grant. It's a total contribution of eligible costs for up to $1,066,000. But it is a reimbursement program. So the town has to pay the costs up front, submit the invoices, and then they receive reimbursement up to that amount. So they have to borrow the total 2.5, but the estimated cost will be that 1.47 after the MSBA reimbursement. Okay?
I have two follow-up questions, if I may, Mr. Moderator.
You may.
The question is, if we are taking on this debt, is it a debt exclusion or is it a debt within
is.
2.5?
Well, so let me explain that. Sometimes it's a good question, and it's a question that's come up. So sometimes what we see when we borrow big chunks of money is that the borrowing would be contingent upon a debt exclusion if we're taking on debt, or an override if it was operating funds. There's no such contingency in this motion. That doesn't mean that the town can't go seek a debt exclusion at the ballot. What it does mean, though, is if that you do this borrowing now, that's non-contingent, it's an obligation of the town. And should the town choose at the ballot box to exclude the debt, it has that right. It doesn't have to be contingent, but there is no contingency within this motion.
So it would be, the debt would be under 2.5, be within the 2.5.
That's my understanding, is that we can handle the debt service under the levy limit.
Which means it goes up from there every year. Is that correct? Because it's
We're
within the
still
levy
within
limit.
it's still factored into what we can afford under Prop 2.5.
Okay. And the only other question was, did I hear that there's a lifetime warranty on this roof?
Yep. Simple yes or no may do it.
The shingles being specified are a 50-year shingle. It's lifetime for residences, for residential projects.
So for here, is it lifetime or it's 50-year?
For institutions and commercial buildings, it's a 50-year shingle.
Okay, thank you. It's 50-year. Any, Mr. Weider, Selectman Weider, excuse me.
Figures it would have to be a roofing project, right? Christopher Weider, 64 Cleveland Street. No one is saying that we don't need a new roof at the HL Day School. I saw on Facebook and the community page today that there are people trying to not replace this roof. No one has said that. The HL Day School needs a new roof. The experts have said it. I have great respect for Gale Associates. I have great respect for the work done by the superintendent and by the facility director. The question is, do you need a gold-plated roof? When you do a roof of your own home, you hire a contractor, he strips your roof down to the plywood. He puts down an underlayment. We hear the term ice and water shield a lot. On this project, they're talking about diamond deck, which is a CertainTeed product. They then shingle the roof with a shingle. That's what they do. That's what each one of you do. You don't go to bed at night asking your husbands or wives, are our trusses good? Are our rafters falling apart? The rafters and the trusses at the addition on this building have not breached. This is from our maintenance director last week. They have not breached. They are 19 years old. There is some question as to whether or not they were built to spec. They have not failed. And as we all know, the policy in Massachusetts during snow is to shovel off our roofs when you have a certain amount. It's become commonplace at all public schools. So our rafters are not an issue here. The insulation value added to this roof is going to be a 2.5-inch board on top of the roof. If we were doing a building restoration, I would spec this as well. But where we're doing a re-roof, this cost is going to be over $300,000 for this insulation. It is going to take 20-plus years
to recoup the cost of that insulation board, 20 plus years. The windows, last year, Representative Dooley acquired windows for the town. They've been sitting in a trailer for a year. If we were concerned about energy loss, we should have started installing those windows last year. This project, because of the accessories and the amenities above and beyond a roofing project, are forcing this job to be done during the summer because of the query checks of roofers, which means only one bidder even bid the project. To do this job, he is going to have to pay a large amount of overtime, again, because of the amenities. Most of you don't know roofers get $70.76 an hour in their paycheck for prevailing wage jobs. A third of this job will probably be done at overtime, which will mean we'd be paying over $100 an hour for this work because of amenities. The warranty on this roof is a 50-year warranty. Look at all your warranties, and I think Gale Associates will corroborate this. This is a 10-year warranty, 10 years, labor and materials, non-prorated. Remember that word. So for 10 years, this roof will be warrantied by the manufacturer and by the roofer. It is a premium shingle. But after 10 years, your labor warranty is zero. There is nothing in the specification that asks for a Gold Shield warranty to extend the life of this shingle and provide for additional labor. The shingle then is prorated. Every year it loses value. Every year. So it is not a 50-year warranty. It is a 10-year non-prorated warranty. After that, you don't have any labor and you're back to paying the labor. All the other items, all the other amenities on this project are 2 years, according to the specification. 2 years. When you look at the cost, folks, yes, it's $3.5 million. We are going to get $1 million from the state. Do however you want to look at the numbers, it's $2.5 million of taxpayer money. Yes, $900,000 of that has to be earmarked for like projects. That could be a fire station. That could be something else we need in the building world. It doesn't have to be used to spend it on amenities. We can do this job for far less. We can re-roof the school. We can do the windows. We can then use things like our green initiative and other grants to get insulation if we want to increase the insulation value. None of these extras are necessary at this time. We've heard the elementary school, they need a math teacher. They want to bring back world languages. Right there was over $100,000 worth of expenses per year that the schools have asked for. And we can't do those things if we're going to be spending our money this frivolously. They've also spec'd copper roofs on the cupola and on the monitors. Copper roofs. And I was told you're an affluent town. You can afford this. A 50-year shingle is going to be warranted for 10 years. Why do we need copper roofs on the monitors? With those copper roofs come snow guards. With those copper roofs come copper gutters. Again, amenities you don't need. You wouldn't do it in your own home. Why would you do it at your school? We want our kids to be able to compete in a world-class environment out there. We want to make sure we can put computers in the schools. We want to make sure we can give them the proper education. I urge you, re-roof this school. Use the Gale specification for the roofing to re-roof this school. But you do not need these amenities. Yes, they're part of this program through the state, but we don't need this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weider. Any other, ma'am?
Karen Clark, 130 Seekonk. My question is similar to our new Selectman Weeder's comment. When the new school was built 20-odd years ago, there was a roof put on that building that was quite intricate in design. And I guess my question is, again, with cost in mind, is there a drawing of this new roof that is proposed, and will this intricate design be incorporated once again in any new roofing project?
Dr. Laurie?
So with regards to that question, the bid specs as we bid it do not include the architectural shingle to maintain that design. It was bid as an alternate to the project because of the overage in costs for the bid, where the bid came in. We are not planning to accept the alternate. So the roofing shingle will be a single color. Okay. A couple of, can I respond to some of the comments made?
Briefly, I don't want a lot of back and forth, but briefly, yes, the technical comments.
Okay.
Hey, comments through the moderator. If you have something to say, please come up and say it.
Okay. So with regard, there was a comment made about the project having to take place during the summer months. I just want to clarify that we have asked for the majority of the construction to be completed during the summer, not just because of the quarry issue, but because of safety concerns for students. There is asbestos that has to be abated. It's a single-story building. We don't have the capacity to relocate kids in the section that's being worked on. The noise and distraction from roof work happening right above the classroom makes it almost impossible to continue to teach in those circumstances. As far as the insulated boards, Gail could speak to that if anybody else has a question about that, but they are recommending, in order for us to access the MSBA contribution, we have to bring the building to a certain energy code. Those insulated panels that would go above are because we don't have the space to blow additional insulation in and bring it up to the required specs that MSBA has put forward. The reason the window installation has been delayed is because we can't put the glass in. MSBA is going to share the cost of rewrapping the cupolas in aluminum siding, fixing any of the wood trim and the framing that's damaged. It doesn't make sense to move forward with that until all that other work is included in that project.
Thank you. Ms. St. Aubin?
Patricia St. Aubin, 6 Shady Way. Thank you, Selectman Weeder, for that presentation. That was excellent. I think it should all give us pause. And also what Mr. Lutz read in this whole Article 9, the second sentence where it states, the town of Norfolk may be eligible for a grant. That is probably the most important statement on this piece of paper. We may be eligible. I have lived in this town for 23 years, and I've seen other cases where we've tried or not tried and were told we were applying for grants, and they did not come through. The senior center being one, and we were on the hook for the whole amount of the senior center because the grant did not come through. This is a lot of money. When I hear copper is very valuable, and it gets stolen as well because of its value. We really have to consider what we're putting on this particular facility, and particularly where Mr. Weeder has an expertise in this, and he talks about the relative factor of the life of this roof in reality. It gives me pause as a taxpayer in this town, and I hope it does you as well. Maybe eligible for that grant. That should be in parentheses when they're showing these numbers. It should not be already counted in as something we're getting back. Thank you.
Mr. Doyle?
Hi, Thomas Doyle, 7 Chickatawbit. I am the chair of the Norfolk School Committee, so thank you all for coming out this evening. This is obviously an extremely important issue. It's obviously a very expensive issue. We as a committee appreciate the concerns raised regarding the cost, and that's one reason this has been something that has been in the works for years. I think the graph Ingrid showed was 2017 was the timeline we first began a funding request for this. This actually predates this. This goes back to my time and the others' time. They're on the building committee for Freeman Kennedy. At that time, we took it very, very seriously as far as our requirements and our duties, as far as ensuring that project came in under budget and on schedule. As a result of that, and working with the MSBA, who would be our partner here again, we were able to generate or have an overall savings of $1 million. That is unheard of in a lot of municipal projects. So we have a history of where we can manage these projects successfully. One of the terms I've heard mentioned was something along the lines of as extras or the vanity project or whatever the case is, or this could be done cheaper. I disagree with that. The problem is, if you look at this overall budget, and is there a way the project could be made cheaper in a lot of ways? Yeah, maybe. We could do a half-hearted effort to fix it. We've seen the efforts of what half-hearted fixes have done over the years. We've been left with a roof that has leaked consistently. We can't do that any longer. The other problem with the halfway approach, if you will, is within the MSBA funding guidelines, they are very, very strict as far as what can and can't be done. So in order to have the benefit of getting that money, and we will get that grant, we have already been approved, there's not a question about that. If we want to access that $1 million, we've got to go by some of their guidelines. So let's just say, for sake of argument, we don't use that MSBA guideline. The overall effect to the town is still the same. I don't think anyone here is disagreeing financially. The roof has to be replaced. It's a matter of what is the most sensible and fiduciary responsible way to do it, and that's what we are proposing. So this is not some thing at the 11th hour we've come in and, hey, let's just put a roof on. This has been a project that's been at work for 5 to 6 years. It absolutely has to be done. I am loath to spend taxpayer money, as anyone knows. My wife will tell you ad nauseum that I'm loath to spend any money, but but there are times when you simply have to do this. And this is the most sensible and financially prudent way in which to do an obvious need that this town has to have. We are going to have a project manager that will oversee this. One of the things we'll do on the committee side is we will have an ad hoc committee, that would work with Matt to ensure that this project is proceeding on time. Sort of ancillary information is we spoke to the Dr. Cameron over in Rentham, who had worked with this same company, who had worked with MSBA on a roofing project they had. They came in under budget and on time. It can be done. So I know there's very legitimate fears and concerns that this could overrun and be some sort of behemoth that could result in all kinds of issues. That is perfectly fair. But it has to be done, and let's take advantage of this money that's available to us, because this may not be here. Do we won't want to be in a situation, I can't in good conscience recommend that we put ourselves in a situation 2 years from now where the roof totally fails and we don't have $1 million, and then we have to come up with $3.5 million on our own. So I really, in my heart of heart, believe this is the absolute most reasonable thing and best way to approach this. Thank you.
Ms. Van Tyne, I believe you were next, and if you're yielding, I'd go to Mr. Rosenberg. Mr. Rosenberg.
Trying to make it a little more exciting.
I heard, Mr. Moderator, I heard what seemed to me to be inconsistent comments about the warranty. First, that it was a lifetime warranty, then it was a 50-year warranty, and then Mr. Weeder said, actually, it was a 10-year warranty, and after 10 years, the town would be responsible for all labor, and that the amount of reimbursement we'd get for the shingles would decrease, would be prorated and decrease to zero after 50 years. Is it possible for somebody from the engineering firm or somebody appropriate to give me a definitive statement about how the warranty really works and what we would really get if there's a failure, say, at year 45 or something?
Briefly, if we can here.
Mr. Moderator, the shingle manufacturers have multiple years of warranties for their products, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and so on. The thickness of the material is what's driving how long they warranty the product out in the environment. And so the thicker material, it lasts longer, and so they put a longer warranty on that. The reason the 50-year shingle is called lifetime is they assume most people won't own that house for 50 years, and they don't have to worry about it. So they've termed that themselves, not anyone in the industry. So what we're essentially looking at is a 50-year shingle that's been manufactured. They're going to stand behind the shingle itself for that duration. There is some prorating, and the labor is separate because the labor is, at the end of the day, not what the manufacturer is warranting. So we have a 2-year contractor guarantee, which is on the installation. Your typical guarantee is 1 year. We've recommended 2 years to carry that for the installation should any issues come up during construction. A longer guarantee with the roofers is usually not worth it due to the cost of insuring for that value. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dooley.
Sean Dooley, 11 Wright Farm Road. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, through you. Just to address the question on the MSBA grant and the wording on May. I have confirmed with the MSBA we did receive this grant. I spoke with them several times last week and today. We do have this grant for $1,066,000. It has been awarded during this award cycle. There was 57 schools that have applied for this. 23 were awarded, and we were fortunate enough to be one of them. They change the dynamic every year, and it gets harder and harder every year. This year, in the warranty application process, there was 87 schools that applied, and only around 23 were granted. So if we do lose this going forward, we don't know necessarily if we'll be able to be given it again. So I just wanted to address that. But the reason you have to have May in it is because it's a reimbursement. So if you were going in and MSBA gives a specific spec and says, in order for us to give you the $1,066,000, you have to use the 50-year roof. You have to put in this, sort of, tie vac, and you have to do ice and water shield and things along those lines. If you decided to cut corners during the process and only used a 40-year roof to save some money, or did some other things that are not in their engineering specs, either at the MSBA or through their agent, then they could not reimburse us. This was the same process that we went through. Both myself and Mr. Doyle were on the school building committee at the time. We had, the $15 million grant from MSBA, and as we went through, as things got done, it was basically kind of like if you were borrowing from a bank. They would come in and check it off. All right, you've done this to our code, done this to our spec. Here's your reimbursement, and our project manager would turn that in. So it is important to note the only reason the word says may is because it's not like they've already given us a check and we can do whatever we want with it. So it is a reimbursement. But that being said, on no uncertain terms, we have been fully granted and given this grant for the fiscal year 2020. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Ms. Van Tine.
Mr. Moderator, can you hear me?
I can.
Outstanding.
Can
Can
everyone
everybody
else
else
hear
hear me? Outstanding. So my name is Carolyn Van Tine. I live at 11 Wright Farm Road. I'm a parent. None of my children are at HOD. My youngest is at Freeman Kennedy, but I still urge the community to support this because of how important I think it is. I think it's important not to lose the money. I think it's important because I'm hearing things like, well, the trusses haven't failed yet, and we'll be able to shovel the snow off the roof. But I also know that if there's a crazy storm, maybe it takes several days to shovel the snow off the roof. And hopefully the kids haven't gone back to school if the roof fails, but God forbid, what if they do, right? There's a reason why everybody agrees we need a roof. And there's a reason why there's been several years worth of investigation and thoughtful process by many people in the community. And there's a reason why we're here tonight. And I understand that there's some things in the order, right, that give some of us pause. I heard that word frequently this evening, and one of them gives me pause, right? The issue of copper. But it's my understanding from speaking with many people over the last few days subsequent to the actual final bill or whatever it is coming out, that if we as a community tonight vote in support of this for the full amount, because that's what's required, that does not forestall us from then going back and saying, instead of copper, can you please price out a less expensive but still resilient metal? It doesn't prevent, and I understand that they're actually already involved in the process of shoring up some of the more potentially expensive items without jeopardizing the grant. So, which would leave money on the table. And I also know that the school committee and the school have a history each year of coming in under budget and then generating money back into the community. And so, as a voter and as a parent, I am in support of this.
Thank you, Ms. Fantine. All right, hold on. I think we can cross copper and warranties off the list for discussion items. Mr. Rosenberg, something new.
I think I didn't really get an answer to my question about the warranty.
I think it was pretty much beaten down. So
I wanted to know, and I still would like to know, what fraction of the cost of the shingles and labor would we get back if there was a failure after 45 years? And a percentage, like we'd get back 10% or 100% or 3%.
This is the last I want to hear about this particular issue, and then I want to hear other debate about other elements of this. So,
with any roof product or any manufactured product, the warranty is on the manufacturing of that material. So if there's a material defect, that is what the manufacturer warranty is, not the fact whether it fails in use. The labor from the contractor is a 2-year guarantee. So you have a material warranty from a manufacturer and you have a labor warranty from the installer.
Thank you. Sir.
Larry Clark, 130 Seekonk. Just a quick question on the copper. Is that the use of copper materials in downspouts and gutters, is that a requirement of one of the requirements for the grant from the MSBA?
Take that question.
Just for clarification purposes, the asphalt shingles are a majority of the roof on the project. The copper that's being utilized is at 4 locations. There are 3 monitors and 1 cupola, which is a small square footage. There's also copper located at the valleys, which are a high water-prone location. And there's copper at 1 low-slope roof area where we're using the copper because the seams can be soldered, which is more watertight than an open metal seam or a low single-ply membrane that can be more easily damaged.
And that is part of the spec that's approved and part of the commitment from MSBA.
MSBA approves multiple products. They don't necessarily dictate which one needs to be used.
But following now with the approved spec is a requirement of this grant program. I'm just trying to forestall any further questions on this, if anyone knows that. If that's in the spec, that's part of the grant. I'm seeing Mr. Doyle nod his head, but come on up. I want to be done with copper and warranties.
So, any changes to the specifications would have to be approved by MSBA, and they have the right to negotiate with you what your percentage back would be.
Thank you. Matt, let's just hold off for a second. I'm not sure there's a question for you right now. Ma'am?
Anita Mecklenburg, Lakeshore Drive. My children had the privilege of attending H. Olive Day School, and I'm currently the assistant principal there. I'm not going to talk about copper. I'm going to talk about children, and I'm going to talk about teachers who are checking the forecast to see if they have to clear off the counter. I'm going to talk about desks being pulled away and kids being taught in a third of the classroom because it's dripping over there, of custodians walking through math lessons to empty the bucket because it's leaking that much into our classrooms. And this isn't happening this year. This happened last year. This happened the year before last year. It's happened since I've been there. This is my 6th year there. Water is coming down the walls. The computers that we have, beautiful computers, aren't being used because we can't plug them in on that wall because the water is coming in down the walls. So we need a new roof on our school, please. Thank you.
So is my understanding correct that the specs need to be followed 100% or the grant could be in jeopardy? That's, I understand, I'm not going to use the word, I don't want to use that word, copper.
Drawing from my experience on the school building committee with that, what happened is everything we wanted to turn in, we would turn in, and then sometimes we'd get things back where they'd want additional documentation. So everything has to sort of be done as on an ongoing basis. So we can't go outside the approved specs, if that's what you're asking.
Right.
So, yeah, so we stay within the confines of what's been approved. As long as we follow that map that has been laid out for us, we're fine. We will get questions on stuff because, as I said, they are very, very thorough. And it's very good, and they kept us certainly and kept us on track with the Freeman budget. But we will very much have to stay within the confines of what they've laid out for us. I hope that's answering your question.
Right, so we shouldn't enter into this thinking that we could save money down the line, that it's going to be what it is. It is what it is going into this project. We can't get halfway through it and think, well, we can reduce costs here or there. We should just, because when it comes time to be reimbursed, it could bite us in the backside.
Yeah, I mean, the reimbursement is ongoing, and then Dr. Alardi will speak more to that. But, yeah, we can't just start changing it. I think Representative Dooley mentioned that as well. We can't suddenly, like, hey, we're just going to quietly switch this out and hope they don't really notice it. That doesn't happen. We've got to follow what has already been allowed for us.
To the letter, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
The only area that we could possibly do is if we wanted to look at another high-performance metal or to change something out, we can negotiate with MSBA. If they approve the change, then we'd be okay with that change moving forward. Additionally, if they did not approve that change, it wouldn't sacrifice the whole grant. They would not reimburse for that section of the project. If you did something like change insulation that met their energy code, that would be a big problem. But you could, if you changed the cupola from copper to something else, you could negotiate that with MSBA. If they approved that, we would be eligible for their portion of that project. If not, it would all, the area that you changed the product on would be owned by the town fully. We wouldn't get the reimbursement for that section.
Thanks, Jeff. Medora Champagne, 2 Seneca Street. I want to echo some of the sentiments briefly that Thomas made. I also sit on the school committee. Y'all elected me last year. I want to make it really clear that the entire school committee, not just the budget subcommittee, of which I am a member of, as is Paul Cochran, support this project. This project and its planning stages predate my tenure with the school committee. It predates a number of tenures with the school committee. It has been an ongoing project. It is a chance we have to have a third of this project subsidized with a grant that we may lose, and we may have a failed roof. But going beyond that, going beyond what's fiscally responsible and what I believe our fiduciary duty to the town is as your elected school committee in supporting this project, I, as a parent, if my child's bedroom looked like the schools, the pictures of the ceilings in the classrooms where my kid, one of my children, spends 8 to 9 hours a day right now, yes, I would replace that roof. And yes, I would want to rip out the insulation. And yes, I would be concerned about mold. And yes, I would be concerned about trusses and the supports, as would my husband, who's an engineer. We have replaced our roof. We have done a job that might have been bigger than was absolutely needed. We don't want to do the bare bones in our home if we have the ability not to. And right now we have the ability to do more than the bare bones with schools. And I can't for the life of me fathom why anybody wouldn't want to move forward when there's free money on the table that could potentially not be accessible going forward.
Something new.
Can we call the question, Mr. Moderator?
I've got 3 people at the mic, Walter, so let's see. Well, I'll hold your question in abeyance, and let's see where we are with these 3 folks here. I'm sure there's all kinds of new and important information.
I'll be quick, Mr. Moderator. I just want to be sure I'm clear and we're clear on the funding. We're appropriating this money, the town is, and we're going to have to incur some debt to do that. How much debt is a question exactly, but if we do this and we have debt, there'll be a ballot question, and the ballot question
No, it will not.
There will not.
There's not a ballot question proposed right now. Could the town choose at some point to have a debt exclusion to take this outside of our levy limit? They could. That's not proposed here, and it's beyond the scope of what we're discussing.
So the interest on the debt will be within the 2.5 cap?
Everything you see in front of you right now, as is part of our normal levy limit.
Thank you.
All under it.
Thank you.
Mr. Dooley, something new.
Yes, I just wanted to address the question as far as negotiation. During the time that we built Freeman Kennedy School, those of us that were on the committee, we did a lot of negotiations. When we originally built the spec, for instance, we had oil in the school. And at the time, we had no possibility of getting gas. Columbia Gas came in and gave us a proposal, and we were able to negotiate and change that and bring in gas, which was a tremendous saving and ongoing savings going forward. There was other issues that we dealt with, including the roof, including the basketball court and things along those lines, that as we went, we negotiated and we were able to find cheaper solutions. And that's the reason we came in about $1 million under budget throughout the process. So you are able to do things along those lines. There's also certain parts in this project, especially on the addition of the school that is not over the 25 years, so therefore the MSBA gives us much more leeway. They're not giving us money for the new addition. So things that are on the addition portion, we can fully negotiate with the builder, the contractor, and negotiate materials, negotiate time, in certain constraints, to make sure that we're able to save money there. And that we don't even have to go back to the MSBA on that. So just from the standpoint of, and as Dr. Alardi alluded to, if there is one thing that we're negotiating on and the MSBA disagrees with it, then we can decide whether we're going to take that portion out or keep that portion in, depending on what we're going to, on the reimbursement rate. If it ends up being cheaper, but they're saying, well, we're not going to pay for it, but it's still cheaper in the long run, then we should go ahead and do it. We need to make those decisions, having the ad hoc committee on board. There are people that are going to be overseeing this on multiple levels. Myself, Thomas, every single person I know in this town. Nobody, as the gentleman said earlier, I think one of the frustrations is that we have this huge overrun on the police station. We had $2.5 million was raised.
Let's just keep it on this.
I am keeping it on this, and it's it's to the point.
Is it?
It is.
I mean.
It is. It is the fact that people are super hypersensitive about waste because we just went through that. I think because of that, I think this project will be better situated for our town. I think more eyes are going to be on it. I don't think things will be able to, no one's going to assume that things are being taken care of. And I think everyone, whether it's parents or the members of the board and the members of the advisory school committee, everything along those lines, are going to be hypersensitive to people's sensitivity on the money because of the fiasco that we just went through at the police station. So I think that's an important element to understand as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nguyen.
Hi, Jennifer Nguyen, 3 Hemlock Lane. I'm also on school committee. I'm just going to be very brief and tell you that I echo the sentiments of Thomas and Cece and Sean and Medora. And serving on school committee for this past year, I have been most impressed with the number of people involved in this project and the knowledge that they've shared. And I thoroughly have my trust in them. And what I would like to say is I understand both sides of view, and I understand what Mr. Weeder is saying. But I have to say it does sound like there is some room for negotiation, and there is a reason why we have these things. These are our children. We can do better than that, the stains and the buckets, and we don't have time to wait. It sounds like we can negotiate, so we're not getting the gold plated like Mr. Weeder was saying, but let's do what needs to be done now, let's fix it, and then move on to the fire station or the other things. But let's fix it now. We can negotiate to get it sounds like what everybody is saying, and I'm just asking also that if there's many people here who are getting texts from their children, where are they? So if we vote and we move on, I'm asking that if people leave, if we could, I'm sorry, I'm probably messing this up.
Let's just stick to what we got.
Okay, just nobody bring the vote back after people leave, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, we can't prejudge what people are going to do.
Okay.
We can go through that.
Okay.
All right, so there's
Thanks.
now one person at the mic, Walter. If there's no one else lining up, I'm going to allow this last comment. Medora, I assume we can be pretty brief here.
Oh, I can be super brief. It's going to blow your mind. I have 2 pieces of information that haven't been discussed yet.
There we go.
The first I'd like to point out, based upon something that we've already done tonight in approving the town budget, was that we shifted the heating costs associated with the schools to the town. The energy savings, which are proposed to be a 10% reduction in energy cost annually moving forward, will become the town's energy savings. This is not just for the school committee budget. This is an add-on that in taking that cost on, the town will get the benefit of. In addition to that, this being built to MSBA specs, this as proposed being built to MSBA specs, is going to be a very big step, as I understand it, towards the green building initiative that the town has and moving forward to an overall reduction in energy costs across the town. It really is just a win-win. To finish on a 30-second personal note, yes, there are plenty of things that I would love to see in the schools that we don't currently have, some of which Ingrid mentioned that we're not asking for, and some of which haven't even come up yet. Anyone who has spoken to me about the schools knows this. I could go on for hours about what I think would be great for curriculum, for a gifted program, for world languages. We all know that that's necessary. I'm not asking anyone for that. We need this project to go forward before we can even have that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are ready. A couple of things. This requires a 2/3 vote. People do not have to say yay or nay loudly. That's only going to prolong this. Okay? I get it. I'm going to try it on a voice vote. If I can't do it on a voice vote, I may take a show of hands. It's hard to call 2/3. If it's close, we're gonna count it. So let's see if we can do this orderly and quickly, and see if we can't move past this. Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
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 I think that there's no question that that is a 2/3 vote. I knew you couldn't resist, Ms. Doyle.
Mr. Moderator, I move to reconsider Article 9.
Okay, so let's talk about what that is. A motion to reconsider, I suspect, in this context, is to lock in this vote because something can only be reconsidered once. If you don't want to reopen debate on this, you will vote no. If you do, and start this all over again, you will vote yes. So voting no locks it in. All those in favor of reconsideration say aye. All those opposed say nay. Nay. It fails, and that vote is now locked in. I sure wish as many people as could, given babysitters and everything else and other commitments, will stay. I'll give a moment here. Article 10, Water Capital, Mr. Lutz.
Mr. Moderator, I move to indefinitely postpone Article 10.
Mr. Lutz.
Mr. Moderator, there are currently no capital or other expenses proposed to be expended out of this, so we are postponing it. We are moving to postpone it.
Thank you. Seeing no one lining up at the mic, all those in favor of indefinite postponement signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes. Article 11 is committee report, so there's no motion, and I've been told that there's a few different committees that may have some very brief presentations. I want to start, Mr. Calcutt, did you say that the selectmen had something very brief here?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It's kind of funny. The first line that I had here was to thank everybody for your active participation this evening. It's actually, I want to thank you for your less than active participation in staying where you are to listen to the rest of the meeting tonight. Thank you. The success of meetings such as these is gauged on the level of community engagement. Tonight, we would like to highlight one of our collective initiatives as a board to tap into that energy. While town employees of about 250 talented individuals help to run this town, about 125 or so volunteers also aid in keeping it going. Our goal will be to streamline the process for identifying volunteer opportunities and to make the application process more structured and accessible. While a few of these volunteer boards and committees benefit from specific professional or technical background, most just require a passion to push our community forward. You will find a handout at the front tonight that outlines the open board and committee positions, as well as a basic application for submission. Please be on the lookout for additional updates to open positions, as well as board and committee scope outlines on the town website under the What's New front page, and also our official social media outlets. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us, as we're here to help. Thank you once again, and we look forward to serving with you.
Thank you, Mr. Calcutt. Government Study Committee. Is anyone here? Mr. Smith.
I promised the moderator that I'd keep it to 2.5 minutes, but I'll keep it even shorter. The Government Study Committee, we exist in order to investigate how town government is structured and whether or not it should be changed or kept the same. We have 2 vacancies. Thank you for pointing that out. We would love to have more people involved in our committee. We have had a public forum on issues that people were interested in January, and we just had one in April at the Senior Center. We are concerned with what's going on in town, and the number one issue we have is communication. How to get people more involved on a day-to-day basis of knowing what's going on in town, not just at town meeting or a specific article. So we hope that you would be interested in our board. We're going to try to meet during the summer. It requires maybe one night a month for a couple of hours. It's some homework involved. I'll warn you about that. And that we hope you get interested in our board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Bakanowski for the Board of Assessors. And Energy Committee.
Todd, do you want to put the... I'm Andy Bakanowski. I live on Naugatuck Avenue. I sit on the Board of Assessors, currently the chair, which will change once we reorganize in next week, I believe. We put this together because the members in the office were concerned about the number of people coming in and saying, well, why are you raising my taxes so much? And it just was one of those things that we put this together showing that, I think there we go, we lost it. We put these slides together just to show how the tax rates are set. And if we can go to the first slide. Do you need the thumb drive again? Next slide. So, as we just did in previous article, we just set the budget, and from there, that's what determines your taxes. The assessor's office only determines the value of your property. I just want to let you know, when we do abatements, those are basically confidential. However, I would like to give you 3 examples of things that we got this year. One said, I was told to file an abatement. That's the reason why they filed an abatement. I'm serious. We had one person that came in, the house was valued at $800,000, said it was worth $600,000, yet it's on the market for $950,000. So it clearly became obvious that they didn't understand fully that the assessed value has nothing to do with the sale value. They could get $950,000, I don't know if the house even sold yet. Next slide. So the assessed values are based on sales, not current. It's basically the previous year that we're in right now. So what comes out next year, or for fiscal 2020, will actually be 2018. So there is a delay. And I'm going to tell you right now, that delay does cause errors, because some people, and one gentleman here, his assessment went up 11%. There are mistakes, and that's why every single time I've run, I've told people you need to look at your bill to make sure it's correct. Next slide. So essentially, every year the assessments are new. They will go up the normal 2.5. However, sales do drive prices up. And we've all experienced that. I can speak from firsthand. I've had 3 homes in my neighborhood. One sold for $50,000 over asking, one went for asking, and one went for $5,000 below asking. So we'll see what happens next year. Next. So every card, every house that you have has a field card. You should check that. You can check it online. The online information does provide some privacy, so you can't see everything. But if there's questions and it doesn't look right, go into the office and Chris or Kathy will help you. Chris and Don are the 2 new members, or two new office staff. Don's the new chief assessor. Realize we've had 3 assessors in 5 years, chief assessors in 5 years, so we've been struggling with continuity. And as we're finding out that some things weren't quite completed during the departure of the previous assessor, so Don has been diligent about getting caught up on things. I don't know if any of you have met him out in the field, but he's a straight shooter. So the field cards you can either see online, or you can go into the assessor's office and they'll pull it for you and you can go over it. You'll see a bunch of codes at the bottom. They'll explain what all those mean. Next. And just reinforcing, check your card out and see if it's correct. I've checked mine a long time ago when my shed was built, and it was 80 square feet larger and was higher taxed. So if anybody has questions.
Not really for questions or answers, but we do appreciate the report.
Okay. Lastly, abatement applications. They're due by February 1st, and you can only file for that current year. So, okay.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay, thanks.
While you're there, Energy Committee?
So last fall, this body approved $15,000 to do an energy audit for all the town buildings. We have a draft. We are looking at it right now. We're actually meeting tomorrow afternoon with the consultants. It's a work in progress, and what's not unusual about these projects is that you tend to find out what you don't have for readily available information. A lot of information has to be included with energy usage, whether it's bills, square footage, usage, hours of operation, the actual equipment, what it is. We have to fill a lot of things in, but at the same time, we are hoping we can get this done in the next month and get the application submitted to the state to become a green community. Good news, bad news. Good news is that the designation grants are still in the $140,000 to $150,000 range. The bad news is that the competitive grants, which come after that for other projects that we can fund, have been sliding down. I did go to a meeting yesterday, and about $10 million has been given to green communities to date, and that the pie is getting smaller and smaller. So unfortunately, we'll have to deal with that. I will say, though, that the town, the selectmen, Kevin's the sole survivor on that one, 2 weeks ago signed the municipal vulnerability project paperwork, which actually looks at sustainability, resiliency, and all kinds of other safety things. The state is developing these programs for municipalities to become more self-sufficient, and so they don't have to get state aid for certain things. But this particular application allows up to $400,000 for the first cut through, and subsequent years will have other money available. This overlaps well with the work the Energy Committee wants to do, some of the work that Matt Hafner wants to do as well. If you've been up to his office, you'll see he's got a list of things, and we overlap well, and hopefully we'll be able to continue with that. So that's about it. So we're moving. Hopefully by the fall we'll have everything in, and we'll give you an update then too. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Andy. There was no report for the Affordable Housing Trust, so we are moving to Article 12. Ms. Klein.
Mr. Moderator, I move to amend the town's general bylaws to change all gender-specific pronouns to gender-neutral pronouns in a manner consistent with the examples below. Board of Selectmen changes to the Select Board. Selectmen changes to Select Board Member or Member of the Select Board. Chairman changes to Chair or Chairperson. Vice Chairman changes to Vice Chair or Vice Chairperson. And he, his, and him changes to they, their, and them.
Ms. Klein?
Yes, sorry. Basically, this is just an amendment to change the way the wording is in our bylaws to be up to date with the times and to be more inclusive of females who happen to be in positions so that they're not excluded. That's basically it.
Thank you. discussion. Mr. Miller.
Yes, Kevin Miller, 4 Oak View Trail. I was wondering if there could be another way of saying select board. It sounds just a little clunky to me.
Yes, the group, I guess, thank you, that was put together to do this came up with variations, and this is the one that they decided on. Board of Selectmen just changes to the Select Board. It just makes it, I mean, you'd have to refer to them as something different to change it to something different. If you're just taking man out instead of.
I will point out anecdotally that the towns that are moving towards more neutral terms are almost universally using this.
Okay. It just sounds a little clunky. I am all for I am all for moving it to the neutral language. It just I wish there was a way that it would not sound so clunky.
We could go with royal court.
I think that what people
See, I'm getting some nods over there.
Just real quickly, I think what people need to remember is that this isn't changing the way you speak. You can still say whatever you want. However you want to address them and however they wish to be addressed on a personal level is between you and them. Same as you would say congresswoman or congressman or congressperson or person of Congress. I mean, however you decide to do it. This is only changing the way it's written so that when it's written, instead of saying he, it says they. Same as your Facebook profile. When you update your picture, it says Susan Klein updated their picture because they have no idea if I'm male or female, and that's the way it says. And it's just to be sure you're not offending anyone. It's going to be written that way, but if you feel that is not the way you would like to say it, you certainly can still refer to them as the Board of Selectmen. I don't think anyone's going to say you can't. It's simply the way it's written in the bylaws.
And I hope I didn't mean it like that. It just when it comes to finding the right way to replacing a word, it's that balance between finding something that works and that has the right sound in the ear.
Thank you. Ms. Van Tine.
Carolyn Van Tine, 11 Wright Farm Road. I do like Royal Court, but I also like this. I like the idea of the inclusivity. I was wondering, and I actually think Ms. Klein answered my question whilst I was on my way to the microphone. I am female, and it did not prevent me from running for selectman, but I know a lot of people were sort of like, oh, aren't you really select woman, right? It made people feel awkward. So I like the idea of it. But I did just purchase 500 signs that say selectmen, and so they're staying selectmen. So that's it. That's all. Thank you very much.
Ms. Battistone.
Anne-Marie Battistone, Seacon Street. I don't see the word they here. What are you referring to?
It's there in the last line.
They,
They
their,
say he,
them.
he, she, his, hers, him changes to him, her.
It's in green, up on the board. It's also in
It's
bold.
not in the, it is slightly varied from the article.
If you were looking at the one that was mailed, it is not in that one because the way that they presented it to the advisory board, initially, they came up with he/she. And as the advisory board, we debated and voted and decided that we would like them to change the wording, which they were already going to do on their own because after they decided that and wrote the warrant, they had done some research at the way other towns did things. So they actually ended up changing it on their own, even though that was the recommendation of the advisory board. But the way that town government works, in case you are unfamiliar, is you can't change the warrant in this paper ballot that's mailed out once it's been submitted. So it has to be in a motion tonight, and that's why it is changed there.
Ms. Battistone, to me, if you have another question?
Well, so a singular pronoun becomes a plural pronoun.
It is what it is. It's right there.
Makes no sense.
But that's the way that the times are, and that's the consistency in the world now. That's not this town deciding it. That's what everyone is doing.
Okay, so,
Person has male
seeing no one else at the mic, this requires, it's a general bylaw, so it requires just a majority vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it by a clear majority. Article 13 is a road acceptance article. Mr. Fronczak.
Mr. Moderator, I move to indefinitely postpone Article 13.
Mr. Fronczak.
After the warrant was printed, the planning board requested that this be withdrawn.
You have something to add to that, Mr. Byron?
Yes. Walter Byron, Chairman of the Planning Board. The developer has a punch list that he's working on to get ready to have the street accepted by the town. And while he has made significant progress, it's not complete, and we recommend the indefinite postponement. We'll probably bring this back to the fall town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Byron. Seeing no one else at the mic, all those in favor of indefinite postponement say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. It passes unanimously. Article 14, revolving fund spending limits. Mr. Fronczak.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 14 as printed in the warrant and shown on the screen.
Is there a second? Mr. Fronczak.
Every year we have revolving funds. This article sets the expenditure limits on roughly, I think there's 16 of them. So this is just a routine article. Thank you.
Seeing no one at the mic, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 15 is the Community Preservation Act Administrative Budget. Ms. Klein.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 15 as printed in the warrant. Okay.
Ms. Klein.
Yes. This is to, according to Mass Chapter Law 44B, they can appropriate the sum of $15,000 from the annual revenues in the Community Preservation Fund for the purpose of funding the administrative and operating budget for the Community Preservation Committee and any other action relative thereto. From my understanding.
That's fine. This
Okay.
is just an annual thing so that they can pay their administrative expenses. It goes along with the next article as well. Seeing no one at the mic, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 16, Ms. Klein.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 16 as printed in the warrant.
And Ms. Klein.
Again, this is to reserve a sum of money equal to the state mandated minimum amount of 10% from the fiscal 2020 Community Preservation Fund revenues for the appropriation of open space creation, acquisition, and preservation, 10% from the fiscal year 2020 CPF fund revenues for the future appropriation of affordable housing creations, and 10% from fiscal year 2020 CPF revenues for future appropriation towards the acquisition and rehabilitation and restoration of historic resources.
So every year we have to take our revenues and dedicate 10% to each of the three purposes under the Community Preservation Act. This is the same article that we see every year. Mr. Rosenberg, you have a question or a comment?
I have a question. I would like to know how much the 10% amounts to. That is, what's the dollar amount that that 10% means?
Anyone have that information? Mr. Lindmark, or do you possess that?
I'd be happy to provide that information to you directly. I don't have a dollar amount because it fluctuates year to year depending on what the dollar amount that comes in. And then the state revenue match, which is on a decreasing amount year over year. So again, 10% of that also goes to those three rationales, and that fluctuates. So I don't have a definitive dollar amount for this year, but 10% of the revenues that come in, whether it's through the real estate tax, 1%, or through the state match, 10% of that then goes to those three items.
Thank you. Seeing no one else at the mic, all those in favor of Article 16, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 17 is a historical project under the Community Preservation Act. Ms. Klein.
Mr. Moderator, I move to appropriate and transfer from the Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserves $25,000 for the restoration of the exterior of the historic Tramp House located on Town Hill.
And
Basically,
either,
this, yeah.
either Ms. Klein or right near you we have Ms. Pine or Ms. Whitney. If they want to chime in, I'm sure they will.
It's
So go
basically just the restoring the Tramp House. And if anyone has any questions, I can't answer them. I would hope that she can.
They seem like they're nodding.
Does anyone have any
Ms.
questions?
Pine? Or Ms. Andrade? Anyone who wants to?
Oh,
Wow.
she cedes to me. Cindy Andrade, I'm the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. The only thing that I wanted to tell everyone before Betsy explains the project, because she'll be much better at that than I will, is that this is a worthy project and the CPC approved it with a unanimous vote.
Thank you, Ms. Andrade. Ms. Pine?
Hi, I'm Betsy Pine. I live at 187 Seekonk Street. I don't know if any of you have been on Town Hill lately, but if you have, you must have noticed how beautiful Town Hill is. Our DPW does such a great job up there. But unfortunately, the Tramp House is in quite a state of disrepair. The paint is falling off just everywhere. So we are hoping with this award that the Tramp House can look as good as the rest of Town Hill. We are going to be open on June 15th for a rededication of the garden up there that's maintained by the Garden Club. But the Tramp House won't look so great. But next year is Norfolk's 150th birthday, and we are hoping that it will be looking very spiffy for next year. We got 3 quotes from different contractors. We picked Sam Ziegler, who has the most experience in this area, and we think it's going to look pretty special, and everybody's going to be very proud of how nice it looks. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Pine. Seeing no one else up, Ms. Whitney?
Elizabeth Whitney, 26 Valley Street. I have been on the Historical Commission for many years. I think when I wrote my book in 2007, my Pondville book. And Betsy Pine has been an extraordinarily dedicated and knowledgeable leader of our commission. I have been on many historical jaunts with Betsy. I have met members of the Massachusetts Historical Commission. She is held in extremely high esteem. I personally did put together, this is my little plug, the walking tour of Town Hill and Town Center. And the Tramp House is one of the sites that I show in my pamphlet. And as I was putting together a presentation to give at the library of the Town Hill, I was looking for pictures in the Historical Commission office as well as the public library. And it was wonderful to see Betsy Pine's children. Your daughter is now age 37, and in the picture she was 3. And your son is, and he was, and she was involved in historical development and recognition in this town then, 3 and 7. She is extraordinary, and I am very proud to be on her committee.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Seeing no one else at the mic, all those in favor of the Tramp House project signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 18 is annual Chapter 90 fund acceptance. Ms. Terrio.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 18 as printed in the warrant.
Ms. Terrio.
As you had mentioned, this is a standard article. We visit this once a year, and it basically will allow the Board of Selectmen to utilize Chapter 90 monies from the state for the purposes of improving public roads.
Seeing no one at the mic, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 19, grant acceptance. Ms. Terrio.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 19 as printed in the warrant.
Ms. Terrio.
Thank you. Once again, this is an article that we visit once a year. It's a standard article, and it also authorizes the Board of Selectmen to accept grants on behalf of the town.
Thank you, Ms. Terrio. Seeing no one at the mic, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Article 20, acceptance of easements. Mr. Beachkovsky.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 20 as printed in the warrant.
Mr. Beachkovsky.
This is as well another annual article authorizing the selectmen to act on behalf of the town.
Thank you. Seeing no one at the mic, this because it does raise the potential for eminent domain to to obtain such easements. It requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes by a clear 2/3. Article 21, surplus property. Mr. Beachkovsky.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 21 as printed in the warrant.
Mr. Beachkovsky.
This again is a article on copper. A standard article for the annual operating of the town.
Yes. My new favorite advisory member.
way to just get that joke in just before we adjourn. It's well struck. Mr. Rosenberg.
Yeah, I think when I asked about a week ago, there was no surplus property that was contemplating being sold, but let me re-ask the question. Is there any surplus property being contemplated for sale?
That was my latest information.
That there is not.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. McGee.
Mr. Moderator,
Hold on Ms. Robbins.
if the slides can be advanced to the next one, we have a list.
Here we go.
I remember the last time you did ask that, and I should have stood up and said something, because I did know these vehicles, although old and expiring, are sitting in our yard. I should have said something to you. But I'm glad we have this up here for any questions for anybody.
I think that 2003 Crown Vic, it's got your name all over it, Mr. Rosenberg. Any questions, comments further on this? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It is a unanimous vote. I will take a motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everybody, for a very productive evening.